The sound of human flesh being sold should haunt a man forever. But in Dust Ridge, it was just another Tuesday. Sheriff Cole Barrett had seen evil wear many faces on the frontier, but nothing prepared him for the moment a broken woman stood on that auction block, stripped of everything except the will to survive. What he did next would either save two souls or destroy them both. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the world. The western sun bled across Dust Ridge like an open wound, casting long shadows through the town's main street where decent folk rarely ventured after dark. The auction yard sat at the edge of respectability, close enough to commerce that businessmen could pretend not to notice it, far enough from the church that the preacher didn't have to acknowledge its existence in his Sunday sermons. Cole Barrett stood with his back against the livery stable, arms crossed, watching the crowd gather with the kind of detachment that came from seeing too much darkness in too short a life. At 34, he'd worn the sheriff's badge for 6 years, long enough to know that law and justice were two different animals, and only one of them had teeth worth fearing. The auction yard was a rectangle of packed dirt surrounded by rough-hewn posts and rails that had seen better decades. Torches flickered in the early evening gloom, casting dancing shadows across faces Cole had arrested, released, and arrested again. Most were drifters, men who'd found in Dust Ridge a place that asked no questions about their past, demanded only that they keep their present violence to acceptable levels. "You here on business or pleasure, Sheriff?" The voice belonged to Marcus Thorne, who ran the general store and served on the town council. One of those men who kept his hands clean by ensuring other men's hands stayed dirty enough to do necessary work. "Just watching," Cole said, not looking at him. "Nothing illegal about a labor auction." Thorne's tone carried the defensive edge of a man who'd rehearsed this justification. "These people agreed to contracts. It's all documented, all legal." Cole finally turned his head, his gray eyes flat as winter stone. "That what helps you sleep, Marcus? Calling it contracts?" Thorne bristled, his merchant smile faltering. "The law says—" "I know what the law says." Cole pushed off from the stable wall, his full height adding weight to the quiet menace in his voice. "I also know what it doesn't say. So why don't you go count your money and let me do my job?" Thorne retreated into the gathering crowd, muttering about respect and authority, but Cole had already dismissed him. His attention fixed on the platform being prepared at the yard's center, weathered planks elevated 3 feet above the dirt, high enough that everyone could see what was being sold. The auctioneer was a man called Sullivan Quick, a name probably as false as his claims that every person crossing his platform had volunteered for their circumstances. Quick was thin to the point of skeletal, with the kind of angular face that looked designed for sneering. He wore a long coat despite the evening heat, and his voice carried the oil-slick smoothness of professional deception. Gentlemen, gather close!" Quick's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Tonight we have prime offerings, strong backs, skilled hands, and opportunities for those wise enough to invest in quality labor." Cole's jaw tightened. Quality labor. As if humans were lumber to be graded and priced. The first people brought to the platform were a family, father, mother, 2 children barely old enough to work. Their contract involved a debt for passage west that had somehow tripled since their arrival. The father's eyes held the hollow look of a man who'd already surrendered everything except the biological imperative to keep breathing. A rancher named Brennan bought their contract for 3 years' labor. The family would work his spread north of town, their debt forgiven at contract's end, or more likely, expanded with new charges for housing, food, and mysterious administrative fees that would keep them bound indefinitely. Cole watched them led away, the children stumbling in the torchlight, and felt the familiar weight settle deeper in his chest. He could arrest Sullivan Quick tomorrow on any number of charges: fraud, coercion, conspiracy. The charges wouldn't stick. Quick had papers, witnesses, a lawyer who visited from Denver twice a year to ensure every exploitation wore legal clothing. This was the poison of the frontier, not the violence everyone expected, but the systematic cruelty that decent people had learned to ignore. 2 more contracts sold. A young man with carpenter's hands, bought by the lumber mill. An older woman who'd been a seamstress, purchased by the hotel to work their laundry. Standard transactions in Dust Ridge's shadow economy. Then Sullivan Quick turned toward the holding area, and something changed in his expression, a flicker of disgust that he quickly masked with his professional smile. "And now, gentlemen, we have something unique." He gestured, and two of his men emerged from the shadows, half dragging a woman between them. Cole straightened, every instinct suddenly alert. She was perhaps 30, though hardship made age difficult to calculate on the frontier. Dark hair hung in tangled waves past her shoulders, framing a face that might have been beautiful before life had carved away everything soft. She wore a dress that had once been brown, but was now mostly the gray of accumulated dirt and despair. Her feet were bare, crusted with mud and old blood. But it was her eyes that struck Cole like a physical blow, deep brown and absolutely empty. Not dead, but evacuated, as if the person who'd once lived behind them had packed up and left, abandoning the shell to whatever came next. The men shoved her onto the platform. She stumbled but didn't fall, catching herself with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd learned that showing weakness only invited more pain. She stood there, swaying slightly, staring at nothing. "This here is Alara Vance," Quick announced, his voice taking on a different quality. Not quite mocking, but close. "Now, I'll be honest with you, gentlemen, this one's been difficult to place." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Cole's hands formed fists at his sides. "She came west with the Halloran Company. You remember Halloran, that drunk who thought he could run freight without paying protection? Well, Halloran's dead now, and his debts passed to his workers." Quick walked around Alara like she was livestock being displayed. "Problem is, this one's got no useful skills. Can't cook worth a damn, can't sew, too frail for heavy labor. Tried placing her at Miller's Ranch. She lasted 3 days before they sent her back. Tried the boarding house. Same result." He stopped directly in front of her, and Cole saw Ilara's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, the only sign she was still present in her own body. "So I'm offering her contract cheap," Quick continued. 5 years, and I'll take $10 for it." $10, gentlemen. That's less than a decent horse." The crowd stirred, but no one stepped forward. Cole could read the calculation in their faces. Even at $10, a worker who couldn't work was no bargain. "Come now," Quick's voice took on a wheedling edge. "Surely one of you can find use for her. She's clean enough once you wash her down. Still has teeth." He grabbed Alara's chin, forcing her mouth open. "See? All there." Cole was moving before he realized he'd made the decision, pushing through the crowd with enough force that men stumbled aside. But someone else spoke first. "Not even worth a brothel," a voice called from the back. "They got standards, Quick." The laughter that followed was cruel, vicious, the sound of men reassuring themselves of their superiority by finding someone lower to mock. Sullivan Quick's face twisted with genuine anger. "You want to know the truth?" he snapped. "This one's worthless. I've fed her for 2 months and she ain't earned back a single meal. Should have just dumped her on the prairie and let nature handle it." The words hung in the torchlit air like poison gas. Alara didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stood there, enduring, like she'd endured everything else, by becoming less present, less vulnerable, less there. And something in Cole Barrett broke. Not dramatically, not obviously. Just a quiet internal snap, the sound of a man's last restraint giving way. "I'll buy." His voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. The crowd went silent, heads turning, torchlight catching the sheriff's badge on his vest. Sullivan Quick's eyebrows rose. "Sheriff, you want a bid?" "I'll buy the contract," Cole repeated, his voice flat. "Final. $10. Quick recovered quickly, scenting an unexpected profit. "Well now, if the sheriff's interested, perhaps we should open proper bidding. Start at 10, see if anyone wants to—" $10, Cole said again, stepping to the platform's edge. "That's what you asked. That's what I'm paying. We done?" The crowd had gone completely quiet now, watching this unexpected development with the avid interest of people who'd found new entertainment. Sullivan Quick's expression cycled through calculation, suspicion, and finally resignation. "Cash money?" he asked. Cole pulled a small leather pouch from his vest, counted out 10 silver dollars onto the platform with deliberate precision. Each coin rang against the wood like a small bell tolling. "Contract's 5 years, Quick said, producing papers from his coat with the speed of a man who always had contracts ready. "All debts, responsibilities, and obligations transfer to you. She don't work. That's your problem. She runs. that's your problem. She dies, that's your loss. Give me the paper. Quick handed over the document, dense text in legal language that basically spelled out ownership of a human being for half a decade. Cole took it without reading, folded it once, and shoved it in his pocket. Pleasure doing business, Sheriff, Quick said, his smile returning now that money had changed hands. You want her delivered somewhere, or she can walk. Cole turned to Alara for the first time, meeting those empty brown eyes. Come on. For a long moment, she didn't move, just stared at him with that evacuated expression, as if processing whether this new development required any response from her. Then, mechanically, she stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted as Cole walked back toward the main street, Alara following 3 paces behind like a shadow. He could feel their stares, hear the whispers starting, speculation, jokes, crude assumptions about why a sheriff would buy a woman everyone else had rejected. Let them talk. Cole had stopped caring about Dust Ridge's opinion of him about 4 years ago, roughly around the time he'd realized that enforcing law in this town meant protecting people who'd exploit that protection to hurt others. He walked past the saloon, past the hotel, past the general store where Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway with an expression of scandalized confusion. Cole didn't acknowledge him, didn't acknowledge anyone, just walked with steady purpose toward the edge of town where his cabin sat in deliberate isolation from the settlement proper. Behind him, Alara followed, not because she wanted to, not because she trusted him, but because survival on the frontier meant accepting whatever came next and hoping you'd live through it. The cabin came into view as full dark settled over the land, a solid structure Cole had built himself from pine logs, chinked tight against winter winds. Smoke rose from the chimney. He'd banked the fire before heading into town, knowing he'd want heat when he returned. He climbed the 3 steps to the porch, opened the door, and stepped inside without looking back. After a moment's hesitation, Alara followed. The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies and books. A door led to a small bedroom in the back. Everything was organized with military precision, nothing wasted, nothing decorative. Cole crossed to the fireplace, stirred the coals, and added wood. Flames caught, pushing back the darkness. There's water in the basin, he said, not turning around. Soap beside it. Clean yourself up if you want. Silence. He could feel her standing just inside the door, every muscle probably tensed for whatever came next. There's bread and dried meat in that tin on the shelf, he continued, moving to light the oil lamps. Help yourself. You're probably hungry. More silence. Cole finally turned to look at her. Alara stood exactly where she'd stopped upon entering, 3 feet inside the door, arms at her sides, staring at him with those empty eyes, waiting for the real demands to start, for the mask to drop, for kindness to reveal its price. Look, Cole said, suddenly tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. I don't know what you've been through. I can guess, and the guessing makes me sick, but I don't know. What I do know is you're here now, and I'm not interested in... He stopped, searching for words that wouldn't sound like lies. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to use you. Tonight, you eat if you're hungry, wash if you want to, and sleep. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. Alara's expression didn't change, didn't soften with relief or harden with suspicion. She just stood there, processing his words through whatever filter her experiences had installed. Cole realized he was waiting for a response that wouldn't come. He nodded once, more to himself than to her, and turned back to the fire. Bedroom's through that door, he said over his shoulder. Take it. I'll sleep out here. He heard her move finally, not toward the food or water, but toward the bedroom door. She paused there, and he felt her eyes on his back, studying him with the intensity of prey evaluating a predator's intentions. Then she stepped through and quietly closed the door. Cole stood by the fire for a long time after that, staring into the flames, wondering what the hell he'd just done and why it felt simultaneously like the worst mistake and the only right choice he'd made in years. The first night passed in tense silence. Cole kept his word, spreading his bedroll near the fire and lying awake listening to the cabin's small sounds. Wood settling, wind testing the shutters, the occasional pop from the dying fire. And from the bedroom, nothing. Not a sound. Either Alara was the quietest sleeper on the frontier, or she was lying awake as he was, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Probably the latter. When gray dawn light began filtering through the windows, Cole rose, stirred the fire back to life, and started coffee. The bitter smell filled the cabin, familiar and grounding. He was measuring grounds when the bedroom door opened. Alara stood in the doorway, wearing the same filthy dress, her hair still tangled. But her face was clean. She'd used the water and soap sometime during the night. Without the layers of grime, he could see the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the hollow beneath her eyes that spoke of too many meals missed. "Morning," Cole said, keeping his voice level, unthreatening. "Coffee?" She stared at him for 3 full heartbeats, then gave the smallest nod he'd ever seen. He poured 2 cups, set one on the table, and took his own to the chair by the fire, leaving the table to her, giving her space, showing her he wasn't interested in cornering her. Alara approached the table like a cat approaches an unknown situation, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. She picked up the cup with both hands, held it close to her face, letting the steam warm her skin. But she didn't drink, just stood there holding it, watching him over the rim. "You got a question," Cole said, not making it a question himself. "Ask it." For a moment he thought she wouldn't speak, then in a voice like rusted hinges, "Why?" Just that. One word, but it contained multitudes. Cole considered his answer carefully. On the frontier, lies were easy and truth was dangerous, but something told him this woman had heard enough lies to last several lifetimes. "Because leaving you there would have made me no better than them," he said simply. "And I'm trying real hard not to become the kind of man this place wants me to be." Alara's eyes narrowed slightly, the first real expression he'd seen cross her face. Not belief, but a recognition that his answer was at least unexpected. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice still rough from disuse. "Now you drink your coffee before it gets cold," Cole said. "After that, we figure out how 2 people live in the same space without killing each other. I work most days, sheriff's business. You do whatever you want. Read, sleep, walk outside. This land goes on for miles. You want to explore it? Go ahead." "I'm supposed to work," Alara said flatly. "The contract says—" "I know what the contract says." Cole pulled the folded paper from his vest pocket and crossed to the fireplace. He held it over the flames until it caught, then dropped it onto the logs. They both watched it burn, legal words curling into ash. "Don't care much for contracts that treat people like property." Alara's cup trembled slightly in her hands. "Then what am I supposed to do?" And there it was, the real question, the terrifying one. Because being property was horrible, but it was also simple. You did what you were told, and if you survived, you survived. Freedom was more complicated. Freedom required decisions, choices, the possibility of failure that was actually your own. "Whatever you want," Cole said, meeting her eyes. "You're free." He saw it hit her, not relief, but something closer to panic. Her breath quickened, her knuckles white around the cup. For a moment he thought she might bolt, might run straight out the door and into the wilderness rather than face the overwhelming terror of autonomy. But she didn't run. She just stood there, shaking, holding that cup like it was the only solid thing in a suddenly liquid world. "I don't know how," she whispered. Cole felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, but opening. He'd seen hardened outlaws face down gun barrels with less fear than this woman showed at the prospect of freedom. "Then you'll learn," he said gently. "And I'll help if you want help. But it's your choice. Everything from now on is your choice." Alara stood frozen for so long that Cole began to worry she'd actually broken something fundamental inside. Then, slowly, she lifted the cup to her lips and took a sip of coffee. It was such a small thing, but it was a choice. And it was hers. The first week passed in careful choreography. Cole established a routine and stuck to it with military precision, creating a predictable structure that Alara could observe and navigate without surprises. He rose at dawn, made coffee, ate a simple breakfast. Then he'd head into town for sheriff's business, checking on the jail, empty more often than not, making rounds, dealing with whatever minor disputes or drunk cowboys needed attention. He always told Alara exactly when he'd be back. Should be home by supper time. Might be late tonight, meeting with the council. Back by noon, unless something goes wrong. and he always came back exactly when he said he would. At first, Alara spent most of her time in the bedroom, emerging only for food or water before retreating again. Cole didn't push. Just left meals on the table, kept the cabin clean and warm, and gave her space to exist without demands. But slowly, incrementally, she began to venture out. He'd come home to find her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the horizon with that faraway expression. Or standing by the bookshelf, fingers trailing across the spines without pulling any out. Once, he found her in the small garden plot behind the cabin, crouched beside the withered remains of his failed attempt at vegetables, touching the dry soil like she was reading something in it. Cole never commented on these expeditions, just acknowledged her presence with a nod, and went about his business, giving her the gift of being unremarkable. On the 8th day, he came home to find her sitting at the table instead of hiding in the bedroom. A book lay open in front of her, one of his volumes on frontier botany, filled with illustrations of plants and their properties. "You can read," Cole observed, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "Used to be a school teacher," Alara said quietly. Before. The word carried the weight of an entire life destroyed. "What happened?" Cole asked, then immediately regretted it. "You don't have to—" "My husband died," she said, her voice flat, factual. "Cholera. We'd saved everything to come west, bought passage with a freight company. He died 2 weeks into the journey. The company said his debt passed to me, debt I didn't know existed, debt that somehow grew every day. By the time we reached Dust Ridge, I owed more than I could earn in a lifetime. So they sold my contract to pay it." She turned a page in the book, not looking at him. "First man who bought me used me for 3 months, then decided I wasn't worth keeping. Sold my contract to someone else. They used me differently, discarded me the same, passed around like bad currency until even the people who profit from misery didn't want me anymore." Cole felt rage building in his chest, not at her, but at the systematic cruelty that had chewed up a schoolteacher from back east and spit her out as broken merchandise in a frontier auction yard. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate. Alara looked up at him finally, her eyes sharp. "Are you? Or are you just another man waiting for the right moment to take what you bought?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Cole held her gaze, letting her see the truth before he spoke it. "I'm not waiting for anything," he said quietly. "And I didn't buy a person. I bought a piece of paper which I burned. You don't owe me anything, Alara. Not gratitude, not work, not—" He stopped, making sure his next words were clear. "Not your body. Not any part of yourself you don't choose to share." She studied him with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "Why should I believe you?" "You shouldn't," Cole said honestly. "You should wait and watch and make up your own mind based on what I do, not what I say. Words are cheap. Actions cost something." For the first time since he'd seen her on that auction platform, something flickered across Alara's face that wasn't emptiness or fear. It was consideration. The look of someone actually thinking instead of just surviving. She turned back to her book without answering, but she didn't retreat to the bedroom. Just sat there reading while Cole prepared supper, the two of them existing in the same space without violence or demands. It was progress. Small, fragile, but real. The second week brought the first test. Cole was chopping wood behind the cabin when he heard hoofbeats approaching. He set down the axe, wiped sweat from his forehead, and walked around to the front. Marcus Thorne sat on a well-fed horse, looking down at Cole with the expression of a man about to deliver unpleasant news while secretly enjoying it. "Marcus," Cole said flatly, "what brings you out here?" "Council business," Thorne said, dismounting with the careful movements of someone who spent more time behind a counter than in a saddle. "We've had complaints." "About?" "About you, Sheriff. About your purchase at the auction." Thorne's lip curled slightly on the word. "Some folks are concerned about propriety. A man in your position, taking in a woman of uncertain character, living alone out here with no proper oversight. Stop talking." The command was quiet, but it carried enough cold weight that Thorne's jaw snapped shut. "You rode all the way out here," Cole said, his voice dangerously soft, "to tell me that people are gossiping about who I let stay in my own house. That about right?" "The council has a responsibility to maintain moral standards. The council runs labor auctions where humans are sold like cattle," Cole interrupted. So I'm not real interested in their thoughts on morality. You got actual business, state it. Otherwise, get back on your horse and leave. Thorne's face reddened. There are rules, Barrett, even for sheriffs. The town expects me to keep the peace and look the other way while they exploit people too desperate to fight back, Cole said. I do one of those things. Guess which one? Behind him, Cole heard the cabin door open. He didn't turn, but he knew Alara was there, listening, probably terrified that she was about to be dragged back to whatever hell Thorne represented. You're making enemies, Thorne warned. People are talking about finding a new sheriff, someone more cooperative. Then I guess they'll have an election, Cole said. Until then, this is still my land, and you're trespassing. Leave. Thorne mounted his horse with jerky, angry movements. You're making a mistake, Barrett. That woman is damaged goods. She'll cause you nothing but trouble. Cole's hand went to his gun, not drawing, just resting on the grip. A clear message. Thorne saw it and paled. I'm going. But this isn't over. Yes, it is. They stared at each other for a long moment, the merchant with his ledgers in moral outrage, the sheriff with his gun in absolute certainty. Then Thorne yanked his horse's reins and rode off at a pace just short of fleeing. Cole watched until he disappeared over the ridge, then turned back to the cabin. Alara stood in the doorway, her face pale, arms wrapped around herself. They're going to take me back, she said, her voice small. No. You can't stop them. The town, the council, the law. I am the law, Cole said, climbing the porch steps. And nobody's taking you anywhere, not while I'm breathing. She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Why would you risk that? Risk your job, your reputation, for someone like me? Someone like you? Cole repeated, anger flaring. You mean a schoolteacher who got chewed up by a system designed to exploit the desperate? Someone who survived things that would break most men I know. Yeah, Alara, someone like you is worth fighting for. Tears welled in her eyes, the first real emotion he'd seen from her beyond fear. I don't understand you. You don't have to, Cole said gently. You just have to decide if you want to stay. Because if you do, I'll make damn sure you can. But it's your choice. The tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. She didn't make a sound, but her whole body shook with the force of whatever was breaking loose inside her. Cole wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but he knew better. So he just stood there, solid and present, letting her cry without demanding anything in return. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, I want to stay. Then you stay. It wasn't complicated, it wasn't dramatic, it was just a choice, hers and a promise, his. But on the frontier, where most promises meant nothing and most choices belonged to men with more power, it felt revolutionary. The weeks began to blur into something resembling routine. Alara started emerging from the bedroom earlier each day, helping with small tasks without being asked, sweeping the floor, organizing supplies, mending Cole's torn shirts with stitches so precise they looked machine-made. He never thanked her for these things, understanding instinctively that gratitude would make them feel like obligations instead of choices. Instead, he just accepted them as natural parts of their shared existence. He taught her to shoot, spending afternoons behind the cabin setting up targets and showing her how to hold a rifle steady, how to breathe and squeeze instead of pull. Her hands shook at first, but she learned quickly, the same way she'd probably learned everything else in her life, with fierce concentration and silent determination. Why are you teaching me this? She asked one day, after putting 3 shots in a row through the center of a distant tin can. Because being able to protect yourself gives you options, Cole said. Options are freedom. She lowered the rifle, turning to look at him. You really believe that, don't you? That I can be free? I know you can be, Cole said. Question is whether you believe it. Alara was quiet for a long moment, then raised the rifle again. Not yet, she admitted. But maybe someday. Then we'll work on someday. At night, they fell into a pattern of eating together at the table, talking about small things, the weather, the garden Cole wanted to plant in spring, books they'd read. Alara had strong opinions on literature, and watching her argue about the merits of different frontier narratives was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep. She smiled once, briefly, when Cole made a particularly bad joke about a character's poor decision-making. It was gone almost immediately, like she'd caught herself doing something forbidden, but it had been there. Progress. But progress wasn't linear, and healing wasn't simple. On a cold night 3 weeks after bringing her home, Cole woke to the sound of screaming. He was on his feet and through the bedroom door before full consciousness caught up, instincts from years of responding to violence overriding everything else. Alara was sitting up in bed, her face twisted in terror, hands clawing at invisible attackers, lost in some nightmare that her waking mind had probably lived through. Alara. Cole stayed in the doorway, making himself visible but not approaching. You're safe. You're in the cabin. Nobody's here but me. She didn't hear him, just kept fighting phantoms, making sounds of pure animal terror. Alara! Louder now, cutting through the nightmare. Look at me. You're safe. Her eyes focused suddenly, finding him in the doorway. For a heartbeat, he saw complete panic, the look of someone who'd been found by the very monsters she was fleeing. Then recognition crashed in. She stopped screaming, but her breathing came in ragged gasps. Sweat soaked her nightgown. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't, Cole said firmly. Don't apologize for nightmares. They're not something you choose. But I woke you. I've had my share of nightmares, he said quietly. War does that. So does wearing a badge in places where law barely exists. You don't have to explain them to me, and you sure as hell don't have to apologize for them. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. It was the auction. I keep dreaming I'm back there, and this time nobody buys me. This time they just leave me on the platform until I rot. Cole felt his hands form fists. You're not going back there, ever. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. He met her eyes across the darkness. Anyone tries to take you back to that life, they'll have to go through me. And Alara, I'm a hard man to go through. She stared at him, searching for the lie, the empty promise, the false comfort. But Cole had never learned to lie convincingly. Everything he was showed on his face, the determination, the anger at what had been done to her, the absolute certainty that he meant every word. Why? She whispered. Why do you care this much about what happens to me? And there it was. The question that mattered. The one Cole had been avoiding asking himself because the answer was complicated and dangerous. Because you remind me of why I became a sheriff in the first place, he said finally. Before the compromises and the moral calculations. Back when I thought the law was supposed to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. You remind me that maybe it still can, if someone's willing to enforce it right. He paused, then added more quietly, and because nobody deserves to be treated like property, no matter what happened to them, no matter how broken they think they are. Alara's expression shifted, still wary, still wounded, but something else too, something that looked almost like hope. I don't know how to trust you, she admitted. Then don't, Cole said. Trust yourself. Trust that you're strong enough to survive whatever comes next. Because you are, Alara. You've already survived things that would destroy most people. She was quiet for a long time, just breathing, letting the nightmare fade. Will you? She started, then stopped. What? Stay. Just for tonight, just until I fall asleep again. She looked away, ashamed of the request. I know it's weak, but It's not weak, Cole interrupted. And yes. He dragged the chair from the corner to the middle of the room, sat down where she could see him, and settled in. Alara lay back down slowly, watching him like she expected him to disappear or transform into something monstrous. But Cole just sat there, solid and present, keeping watch against nightmares and memories and all the ghosts that haunted this broken woman. Eventually, her breathing evened out. Her eyes closed. She slept. And Cole stayed, just as he'd promised, until gray dawn light began to filter through the window. Then he quietly left, closing the door behind him, and started the coffee. Just another day on the frontier. Just another small choice to be decent when the world kept offering easier paths. But small choices accumulated, and maybe, eventually, they'd add up to something worth calling redemption. For both of them. The morning after the nightmare, something shifted between them. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of something that might grow into it, given time and care. Alara emerged from the bedroom with shadows under her eyes, but her shoulders a fraction straighter than before, as if admitting vulnerability had somehow made her less fragile instead of more. Cole was at the stove, frying eggs in the cast-iron skillet that had belonged to his father. He glanced up when she entered but didn't mention the previous night, understanding that acknowledging her fear might make her retreat back into herself. "Coffee's ready," he said simply. "Thank you." She poured herself a cup, and for the first time since arriving, she sat at the table without that hunted animal wariness. Still cautious, still calculating escape routes with her eyes, but marginally more present. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling with meaningless words. Outside, a cold wind rattled the shutters, carrying the promise of early winter. Cole had noticed the temperature dropping steadily over the past week, knew they had maybe 2 more weeks before the first real snow hit. "I need to ride out to the Anderson place today, shan't?" he said, sopping up egg yolk with a piece of bread. "They've got a property dispute with the Clemens that's threatening to turn violent. Probably be gone most of the day." Alara's hand tightened slightly on her cup, not dramatically, but enough that Cole caught it. "You'll be all right here," he said, not quite a question. "I've been alone before," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her fingers. "I know, but before, you didn't have a choice about it." Cole pushed back from the table, carried his plate to the wash basin. "Now you do. You want to come along, you can. You want to stay here, that's fine too. You want to take the horse and ride somewhere else entirely? Well, I can't stop you." She looked at him sharply. "You'd let me take your horse?" "It's just a horse. I can walk home if I have to." "I could run. Disappear. You'd never find me." Cole turned to face her fully. "That's true. So if you're planning to run, I'd appreciate you doing it before I leave. That way I don't spend the whole day worrying if you're laying hurt somewhere." Elara stared at him like he'd sprouted a second head. "You're serious. Always am about important things. And if I did run, if I took your horse and everything I could carry and just left?" Cole considered the question with the same seriousness she'd asked it. "I'd hope you found somewhere safe, somewhere better than Dust Ridge, and I'd miss the conversations about books." Something cracked in Alara's expression, not breaking, but opening. Her eyes glistened and she looked away quickly, blinking hard. "I'm not going to run," she said quietly. "All right then. I mean it. I'm going to stay here. Wait for you to come back." "I believe you." "Why?" The word came out almost desperate. "Why do you believe anything I say? Why do you trust me when everyone else saw me as worthless?" Cole crossed back to the table, pulled out his chair, and sat down so they were at eye level. "Because worth isn't something other people get to decide for you. It's something you carry inside, whether anyone else recognizes it or not. And Alara, you've got more worth in your little finger than most of the men in Dust Ridge have in their entire bodies." She shook her head, tears spilling over despite her efforts to hold them back. "You don't know what I've done to survive. The things I let happen, the things I did." "Don't need to know," Cole said firmly. "Whatever you did to stay alive. And staying alive when everything's trying to break you? That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be respected. The world doesn't work that way. My world does. And right now this cabin, this is our world. Out there in Dust Ridge and the territories, that's different rules. But here we decide what matters. And I've decided that you matter." Alara pressed her hands against her face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Cole stayed where he was, present but not crowding, letting her release whatever she'd been holding trapped inside for however long. When she finally looked up, her face was blotchy and wet, but her eyes held something he hadn't seen before. Not emptiness, not just survival. Something closer to determination. "I want to help," she said. "With whatever needs doing. The garden, the repairs, the cooking. I want to contribute. You don't have to earn your place here." "I know," she said, and the fact that she said it with conviction told Cole they'd turned some kind of corner. "But I want to. Not because I owe you, because I want to build something, even if it's just a garden that won't die before spring." Cole felt something warm expand in his chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. The recognition of someone who decided to stop merely surviving and start actually living again. "Well," he said, allowing himself a small smile, "that garden could definitely use help. I've got a black thumb that kills everything I plant." "I noticed." Ilara's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "How did you manage to kill Cactus?" Dedication and incompetence. This time she did smile, brief and fragile as morning frost, but real. "I'll see what I can do." Cole stood, gathering his gun belt from where it hung by the door. "Anderson Place is about 3 hours north. I'll be back before dark. You need anything, the Henriks live about a mile west. Follow the creek. They're good people. I'll be fine." "I know you will." He paused at the door, hand on the frame. "Ilara, what you said last night about not knowing how to trust me, that's all right. Take your time. Trust isn't something that happens fast, and it sure as hell isn't something I expect you to give freely. But I want you to know you're safe here, for as long as you need to be." She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes, but he saw her fingers relax around her coffee cup. It was enough. The ride to the Anderson place gave Cole time to think, which was both a blessing and a curse. The gelding moved at a steady pace through the scrub brush and rocky terrain, and Cole let his mind wander over the past few weeks, trying to make sense of what he'd started. He'd always been the type to act on instinct when he saw injustice. It was what had gotten him into sheriffing in the first place, and what had nearly gotten him killed more times than he cared to count. But bringing Ilara home had been different. It wasn't just stopping one moment of cruelty. It was committing to something ongoing, something that required patience and care instead of quick action and a fast gun. And the hell of it was, he didn't regret it. Even with Marcus Thorne making noises about the town council, even with the whispers and speculation that followed him through Dust Ridge now. Ilara's presence in his life felt right in a way few things ever had. The Anderson place came into view just past noon, a small homestead carved out of the unforgiving landscape through sheer stubbornness. James Anderson stood on his porch, rifle cradled in his arms, watching Cole approach with the wary eyes of a man expecting trouble. "Sheriff," Anderson called out when Cole was close enough, "glad you came. Clemens was here yesterday making threats." Cole dismounted, tied his horse to the rail. "Tell me what happened." What followed was the typical frontier dispute. Unclear property boundaries, water rights, and two stubborn men who'd rather fight than compromise. Cole spent 3 hours mediating, walking the disputed fence line, examining old survey markers, and eventually convincing both families that bloodshed over 20 yards of scrub land wasn't worth widowing their wives or orphaning their children. By the time he headed back toward his cabin, the sun was already dropping toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of copper and rust. His stomach growled, reminding him he'd skipped lunch, and he found himself looking forward to getting home. Home. When had he started thinking of it that way? Not just his place, but home. A place to return to where someone would be waiting. The thought should have unsettled him. Instead, it felt like settling into well-worn leather. He was still a half-mile out when he noticed the smoke. Not the normal chimney smoke that should be rising from his cabin, but thick, dark smoke billowing from somewhere near his property. Cole's heart lurched, and he kicked the gelding into a gallop, covering the remaining distance in minutes that felt like hours. His cabin came into view, and relief washed over him. The structure was intact, not burning. But behind it, near the old equipment shed, flames engulfed what looked like a pile of debris. And standing dangerously close to those flames was Ilara, holding a bucket of water. "What the hell are you doing?" Cole shouted, dismounting before the horse had fully stopped. Ilara spun around, her face smudged with soot, eyes wide. "I was burning the old wood from the shed. It was rotted through, dangerous, and I thought—" "You thought you'd start a fire in a high wind." Cole grabbed the bucket from her hands, threw the water on the flames. It made barely a dent. This could spread to the grass, then the cabin, then— "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked, the fragile confidence from this morning shattering. "I just wanted to help, to do something useful, and I thought—" "You thought wrong," Cole snapped, already moving toward the water pump. "Get more water, now!" They worked in frantic tandem, hauling bucket after bucket, slowly bringing the fire under control. By the time they'd soaked every ember, both were dripping with sweat despite the cold air, faces streaked with ash, breathing hard from exertion. Cole stood staring at the smoldering remains, anger and fear churning in his gut. He'd come within minutes of losing everything, the cabin he'd built, the life he'd carved out, Maybe even Alara, if she'd been too close when the wind shifted. "I'm sorry," Alara said again, her voice small. "I didn't mean to. You could have died." The words came out harsher than he intended. "You could have burned down everything, gotten trapped, choked on smoke. You ever think about that? I was trying to help. Well, you damn near helped us both into early graves." Cole threw down the bucket, the clang of metal on stone punctuating his frustration. "You want to do something useful? Ask first. Don't just, 'I'm not a child.'" Alara's voice rose to match his, her own anger finally breaking through the fear. "I don't need your permission for everything. You said I was free, remember? You said I could make my own choices." "Choices that don't involve burning down my property." "Your property." Her eyes flashed. "Is that what this is about? You're worried about your things. I'm worried about you," Cole shouted, and the admission seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. "I came over that ridge and saw smoke and thought—" He stopped, jaw working, trying to get control of emotions he hadn't even known he was feeling. "I thought I'd lost you." Alara stared at him, chest heaving, soot-streaked and beautiful in the dying light. "Why would that matter to you?" "Because it does," Cole said, voice dropping to something raw and honest. "Because somewhere in the past few weeks, you stopped being a responsibility and started being—" He struggled for the right word. "Someone who matters." She shook her head, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. "You can't care about me. I'm broken. Damaged. Worthless." "Stop." Cole crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "Stop saying that. You're not worthless. You're not damaged beyond repair. You're a woman who survived hell and came out the other side still fighting, still trying, still here. I almost burned down your home." "So we'll be more careful with fire," Cole said. "We'll talk about safety. We'll make plans before taking action, but we'll do it together because that's what people do when they—" He stopped again, realizing what he was about to say. "When they what?" Alara whispered. "When they care about each other. When they're building something that matters. When they're falling." Cole released her shoulders, stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "When they're trying to make a life work in the middle of nowhere," he finished. "Safer ground. Come on, let's get cleaned up before we freeze." They walked back to the cabin in charged silence. The anger burned out, but something else humming in the space between them. Awareness, recognition. The beginning of something neither was quite ready to name. Inside, Cole lit lamps while Alara washed her face and hands in the basin. He could feel her watching him, sense the questions she wasn't asking. "I overreacted," he said finally, not looking at her. "Seeing that smoke, thinking something happened to you, it scared me, and I don't scare easy." "You were right to be angry," Alara said quietly. "I was reckless. I wanted so badly to prove I could be useful that I didn't think it through." "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do." She dried her hands on a towel, turned to face him. "Not to you, to myself. I need to know I can do more than just survive. That I can build, create, contribute. That I'm more than just a collection of scars and broken pieces." Cole met her eyes across the cabin. "You are more. You always have been. How can you be so sure?" "Because I see you," he said simply. "Not what happened to you, not what others made you into. You. The woman who reads books on botany and argues about frontier narratives. The woman who wanted to burn rotted wood because she saw a problem and tried to fix it, even if the execution needed work. The woman who's strong enough to keep trying even when everything tells her to give up." Alara's breath caught. "Cole, I see you," he repeated, softer this time. "And what I see is worth seeing." The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. For a moment, Cole thought she might close the distance, might test whether the connection crackling between them was real or imagined. But she didn't. Just stood there, trembling slightly, looking at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "I should start supper," she said finally, breaking the moment. "I'll help." They moved around the kitchen in careful choreography, passing ingredients and utensils, their hands occasionally brushing in ways that felt both accidental and inevitable. They talked about small things, what supplies needed restocking, whether the weather would hold for another week, plans for reinforcing the shed before winter hit in earnest. Safe topics. Normal topics. The kind of things people discussed when they were trying very hard not to discuss what really mattered. But beneath the mundane conversation, something had shifted. A line had been crossed, even if neither was quite ready to acknowledge it. They ate dinner at the table, and afterward, Alara didn't retreat immediately to the bedroom. Instead, she sat by the fire while Cole read from a book of frontier history, occasionally reading passages aloud when something struck him as particularly interesting or absurd. "Listen to this," he said, grinning at a particularly ridiculous account. "This prospector claims he found a vein of gold so pure he could bite chunks out of the rock. Says he ate his way through 50 pounds of solid gold before his teeth fell out." Alara laughed, not the brief, guarded sound from before, but a real laugh that lit up her whole face. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." It gets better. He says he made a fortune selling his teeth to collectors who wanted to own gold-toothed dental specimens. "That's not better, that's worse." But she was still laughing, and the sound filled the cabin like music. Cole found himself laughing too, and for a moment they were just two people sharing something ridiculous and wonderful. Not sheriff and rescued woman, not damaged and healer, just two humans finding joy in absurdity. When the laughter faded, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the cabin's corners with the promise of storms to come. "Cole?" Alara said eventually. "Yeah? Thank you for today, for getting angry because you cared, not because I'd failed you, for seeing me instead of just my past." She paused, gathering courage. "For making me believe I might actually deserve to be seen." Cole looked at her across the firelight, this woman who'd been broken and discarded and was slowly, painfully piecing herself back together. "You do deserve it, and one day I hope you'll believe that without needing me to say it." "Maybe," she said softly, "but for now, hearing it helps." They sat together until the fire died completely, neither wanting to break the fragile peace they'd built. When Alara finally rose to head to the bedroom, she paused at the door. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Alara." She closed the door, and Cole settled into his bedroll by the cold hearth, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the hell he was doing. Wondering if caring for someone this damaged was wise. Wondering if he was strong enough to help her heal without breaking himself in the process. But mostly wondering why the thought of her leaving now felt like it would tear something vital from his chest. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the first snowflakes began to fall, winter arriving early, as it always did on the frontier, ready or not. The next morning dawned cold and white, the world transformed into something clean and unfamiliar under 3 inches of fresh snow. Cole woke to find Alara already up, standing at the window and staring out at the transformed landscape with an expression he couldn't quite read. "First snow," she said without turning. "I'd forgotten how beautiful it could be." Cole joined her at the window, careful to maintain respectful distance. "Beautiful and deadly. We'll need to make sure we've got enough supplies to last if this keeps up." "How long do the storms usually last?" "Anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. Out here, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best." Alara nodded slowly. "Then we should take inventory. Figure out what we need." The "we" didn't escape Cole's notice. Not "you should" or "I suppose I could help." Just "we," said naturally, as if it was obvious that they were in this together. They spent the morning going through supplies, Alara making lists with the careful penmanship of a former schoolteacher while Cole hauled crates and sacks from the storage cellar. They had enough flour, beans, and dried meat to last through winter if they were careful. Water wouldn't be a problem with the pump. Firewood was stacked high under the covered area beside the cabin. "We're in good shape," Cole said, surveying their inventory. "Better than most. We'll be fine." "What about the town?" Alara asked. "Don't you need to check on things? Make sure people are safe?" Cole considered lying, making some excuse about how his deputy could handle it, but he'd promised himself he'd be honest with her. "I should make rounds, yeah. Make sure nobody's in trouble, but it means leaving you alone for a few hours." "I'll be fine," Alara said, and this time Cole believed she meant it. "Besides, if I promise not to start any fires without supervision, what could go wrong?" The joke, delivered deadpan, caught him off guard. He laughed, surprised and delighted. "You made a joke." "Don't get used to it. I'm not usually funny." I'll treasure this moment then. She rolled her eyes, but the ghost of a smile played at her lips. Go check on your town, Sheriff. I'll be here when you get back. Cole saddled up, wrapped his coat tight against the cold, and headed into Dust Ridge. The snow had transformed the usually dusty streets into something almost picturesque, though the underlying ugliness of the town couldn't be completely masked by a few inches of white. He made his rounds, checking on the elderly widow Hanson, making sure the saloon wasn't overcrowded with drunks who'd freeze if they passed out in the street, verifying that the general store had enough supplies for those who'd need credit until spring. It was at the general store that Marcus Thorne cornered him, emerging from the back room with the expression of a man who'd been waiting for this opportunity. Sheriff Barrett. A word. Cole sighed internally but kept his face neutral. What can I do for you, Marcus? The council met last night. We've made a decision about your situation. What situation would that be? Thorne's lips thinned. Don't play dumb. Your arrangement with that woman, the one you bought at auction. Her name is Alara, Cole said coldly. And it's not an arrangement. She's a free woman living in my cabin because I offered her a place to stay. Nothing illegal about that. The appearance of impropriety. The appearance, Cole interrupted, is that I gave someone a chance to rebuild their life instead of leaving them to be exploited. If the council has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. We're taking it up with you now, Thorne said, drawing himself up to his full height, still several inches shorter than Cole. The council has decided that if you insist on housing this woman, you need to make it respectable. Either marry her or send her away. Cole went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Come again? You heard me. Marry her and make it legitimate, or remove her from your property. We won't have our sheriff living in sin setting a bad example for who exactly? Cole's voice was soft, dangerous. For the men who buy and sell human beings? For the merchants who profit from exploitation? For the council members who look the other way while people are treated like cattle? We're trying to maintain standards. You're trying to control something that's none of your business, Cole said flatly. And here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to go back to your council and tell them that what I do on my own property, with consenting adults, is not subject to their approval. You're going to tell them that if they don't like it, they can find themselves a new sheriff. And you're going to stop pretending that moral outrage over two people living together is anything more than small-minded busybodies trying to feel superior. Thorne's face flushed red. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. Now, unless you've got actual law-related business, I've got rounds to finish. Cole turned and walked out, leaving Thorne sputtering behind him. Outside, the cold air felt good on his heated face. He stood on the general store's porch for a moment, getting his anger under control. Marry her or send her away. As if those were the only options. As if Alara was property to be legitimized or disposed of. As if her autonomy, her choices, her very existence as a human being didn't matter. The rage that burned through Cole wasn't new. He'd felt it before, every time he encountered the casual cruelty that passed for normal on the frontier. But it felt more personal now, more immediate. They weren't just threatening abstract justice. They were threatening her. Alara, the woman who'd survived hell and was slowly learning to live again. He finished his rounds in grim silence, then headed back to the cabin, his mind churning over the council's ultimatum. Alara was in the kitchen when he returned, preparing something that smelled surprisingly good. She looked up when he entered, and whatever she saw in his face made her stop what she was doing. What happened? Cole hung up his coat, taking his time with the simple action while he decided how much to tell her. Decided in the end that she deserved the truth. The town council has opinions about our living arrangement, he said carefully. They've decided it's not respectable. He watched color drain from Alara's face. They want you to send me away. They want me to either marry you or send you away. The silence that followed was deafening. Alara stood frozen by the stove, her hands gripping the counter as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. I see, she said finally, her voice completely flat. Alara, it's fine. I understand. You've already risked so much for me. Your reputation, your position. I can't ask you to. I'm not sending you away. The words came out harder than he intended. And they can take their ultimatum and choke on it. She looked at him, confused. But they said, I don't care what they said. This is my home. You're here because I asked you to be. And some collection of small-minded hypocrites doesn't get to dictate who I share my space with. They could remove you as sheriff. Then they remove me. Cole crossed to the fire, stared into the flames. I became a lawman to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. If doing that cost me the badge, so be it. Cole, you can't throw away everything for me. He turned to face her fully. Why not? You're worth it. No, I'm not. The anguish in her voice was raw, real. I'm a broken woman with nothing to offer. You could have anyone. Someone whole, someone respectable, someone who hasn't been… She stopped, unable to finish. Someone who hasn't been hurt? Cole finished for her. Someone who doesn't carry scars? Is that what you think I want? Isn't it what everyone wants? I want someone real, Cole said quietly. Someone who knows what darkness looks like and chose to keep fighting anyway. Someone brave enough to rebuild themselves from nothing. Someone who makes terrible jokes about starting fires and laughs at ridiculous prospector stories. He paused. I want you, Alara, not some imaginary perfect woman. You. The admission hung between them, too honest to take back, too true to deny. Alara's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, and I know it's too soon and you're not ready, and maybe I'm not either, but that doesn't make it less true. What am I supposed to do with that? She whispered. Nothing, Cole said. You don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm not asking you to make decisions before you're ready. I'm just telling you the truth. You matter to me. What happens next is your choice. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. The council won't let this go. Probably not. They'll make your life difficult. They already do. Cole, listen to me, he said, crossing to her but stopping just outside touching distance. I don't care what the council wants. I don't care what the town thinks. All I care about is that you're safe and free and have time to figure out who you want to be without anyone forcing you into a box. He met her eyes. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here as long as you want. I'm going to keep being sheriff until they fire me or I quit. And we're going to build our lives on our terms, not theirs. Understand? She stared at him like he was something impossible, something that shouldn't exist in the world she'd learned to survive. Why are you like this? Like what? Good, decent, willing to sacrifice everything for someone like me. Because someone has to be, Cole said simply. And because you're not someone like you. You're just someone. A person who deserves dignity and choice and a chance to heal. That's not complicated, Alara. That's just human. The tears spilled over, and this time, Alara closed the distance between them, pressing her face against his chest and letting go of whatever she'd been holding back. Cole wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was something precious and fragile, letting her cry without trying to fix it or stop it or make it about him. She cried for everything she'd lost, everything that had been taken, everything she'd survived. And Cole just held her, solid and steady, a shelter against storms both past and present. When the tears finally subsided, Alara pulled back slightly, not leaving his embrace but creating enough space to look up at him. I'm not ready, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For marriage or whatever this is between us. I'm not ready. I know. But I don't want to leave either. Then don't. The council can go to hell, Cole finished. We'll figure it out, together. If you want to. Alara searched his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. But Cole had never learned to hide what he felt. And what he felt was written clear across his features. Determination, care, and something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. Together, she echoed finally, testing the word. I think I'd like that. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, covering the ugliness beneath with something clean and new. Inside the cabin, two damaged people held each other in the firelight, not as rescuer and rescued, not as owner and owned, but as two souls who'd found something unexpected in each other. The possibility of healing, of building something worth keeping, of choosing their own path forward regardless of what the world demanded. It wasn't the ending. It wasn't even the beginning of the ending. It was simply the next step in a journey neither had planned, but both were willing to walk together into whatever came next. The days following that embrace settled into something both strange and natural, a rhythm that felt inevitable once they stopped fighting against it. The snow kept falling intermittently, turning the world outside the cabin into a landscape of white silence, broken only by the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk hunting for prey, desperate enough to venture into the cold. Cole and Alara moved around each other with a new kind of awareness, careful but not distant, present but not presumptuous. They'd crossed some invisible line that night, acknowledged something neither could take back, and now they existed in the uncertain territory between what they'd been and what they might become. 3 days after Cole's confrontation with the council, he woke to find Alara already dressed and standing by the window with that rifle he'd taught her to shoot, watching the approach to the cabin with focused intensity. "What is it?" Cole asked, instantly alert, reaching for his gun belt. "Riders," Alara said without turning. "3 of them, coming from town." Cole joined her at the window, peering through the frost-etched glass. Sure enough, 3 horses were making their way through the snow toward his property, moving with the deliberate pace of men on official business rather than the urgency of emergency. "Stay inside," Cole said, buckling his gun belt, "and keep that rifle loaded, just in case." "You think they're coming to make trouble?" "I think 3 men don't ride out in a snowstorm for a social call." He stepped onto the porch as the riders approached, his hand resting casually on his gun, a clear message that he was ready for whatever they brought. The lead rider was Deputy Marshal Owen Garrett, a federal lawman Cole had worked with on a few occasions. Behind him rode 2 men Cole didn't recognize, both wearing the hard expressions of men accustomed to violence. Garrett raised a hand in greeting as they drew near. "Morning, Sheriff Barrett. Mind if we step down? Got some things to discuss." "Marshal," Cole acknowledged with a nod. "You're a long way from Denver." "Business brings me out this way." Garrett dismounted, his 2 companions following suit. "These are Agents Pritchard and Wells working under federal jurisdiction. We're investigating reports of contract fraud and labor trafficking in the territories." Cole felt something shift in his chest, not quite hope, but close. "That's so." "Indeed." Garrett stomped snow from his boots. "Got word that certain operations in Dust Ridge might fall under our purview. Thought we'd start our inquiries with the local law." His eyes flicked to the cabin door, where Cole knew Alara was listening. "Maybe somewhere warm, if you're amenable." Cole hesitated, protective instincts warring with the possibility that these men might actually be here to help. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in, coffee's on." The 4 men filed into the cabin, and Cole saw Alara backing toward the bedroom, rifle still in her hands, eyes wary as a cornered animal. "It's all right," Cole said quietly. "These are federal marshals. They're investigating the auctions." Alara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't lower the rifle. Garrett noticed and gave her a respectful nod. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marshal Garrett. I assure you, we're not here to cause you any harm. In fact, your testimony might be crucial to our investigation." "Testimony?" Alara's voice was steady, despite the tension radiating from her frame. Agent Pritchard pulled a small notebook from his coat. "We've been tracking Sullivan Quick's operation for 6 months. We believe he's been fraudulently creating debts to trap workers into contracts that violate federal labor laws. If you were one of his victims, your account of what happened could help us shut him down permanently." The rifle trembled in Alara's hands. "You want me to testify against him? In court?" "Eventually, yes," Garrett said. "But first, we need to understand the full scope of his operation, how he recruits, how he enforces contracts, who's complicit in the system." Alara looked at Cole, and he could see the fear and hope battling in her expression. Hope that maybe someone official actually cared that justice might exist. Fear that this was another trap, another way for powerful men to use her for their own ends. "She doesn't have to decide anything right now," Cole said firmly. "You want to ask questions? Ask. But she's not making any commitments until she's ready." Wells, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "With respect, Sheriff, this isn't really your—" "It is absolutely my concern," Cole cut him off. "This woman is under my protection. You want her cooperation, you go through me, and you treat her with respect, or you can conduct your investigation somewhere else." Garrett held up a hand, forestalling Wells's response. "Fair enough. How about we all sit down, have some coffee, and talk like civilized people. No pressure, no demands. Just conversation. Slowly, Alara lowered the rifle and leaned it against the wall. She moved to the stove, pouring coffee with hands that shook slightly, while the marshals settled around the table. Cole remained standing, positioned between Alara and the federal men. Not obviously protective, but clearly ready to intervene if needed. "Start from the beginning," Garrett said gently, pulling out his notebook. "How did you end up in Quick's auction yard?" Alara glanced at Cole, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then, haltingly at first, but with growing strength, she began to tell her story. The death of her husband, the debt that materialized, the contracts that passed from hand to hand, each owner finding new reasons to sell her until she ended up worthless, even to those who profited from human misery. The marshals listened without interrupting, scratching notes, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or names. As Alara spoke, Cole watched emotions flicker across the federal men's faces. Anger, disgust, determination. These weren't corrupt frontier lawmen looking the other way for profit. These were men who actually cared about justice. "And the contract Quick claimed you owed," Pritchard said when Alara finished. "Did you ever see documentation of the original debt?" "No. Just told what I owed and that it had grown with interest and fees." "Exactly the pattern we've seen elsewhere," Garrett said, exchanging looks with his companions. "Quick creates false debts, sells contracts to buyers who use workers until they're used up, then cycles them back to Quick, who charges the buyers for breach of contract or damaged goods. It's a closed system designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering." "Can you stop him?" Cole asked. "With enough testimony, yes," Garrett said. "But Quick's got lawyers, connections, documentation that looks legitimate on the surface. We need victims willing to stand up in federal court and tell their stories. We need the paper trail showing the fraud. And we need to move carefully, because the moment Quick suspects we're building a case, he'll destroy evidence and disappear." "How many others?" Alara asked quietly. "How many people has he done this to?" "We've identified at least 40 individuals over the past 3 years," Wells said, "but we suspect the real number is much higher. Most are too afraid to come forward, or they've disappeared into the territories where we can't track them." Alara's face had gone pale. 40 people, 40 lives destroyed, and nobody stopped him. "We're trying to stop him now," Garrett said, "but we need help. We need witnesses who can speak to the fraud, the coercion, the violence. You've already shown more courage than most by simply surviving. The question is whether you're willing to take it further." The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Cole watched Alara wrestling with the decision, saw the fear and anger and desperate hope warring in her expression. He wanted to tell her what to do, wanted to make this easier somehow, but this was her choice to make. Finally, she spoke. "If I testify, will it actually matter? Or will Quick's lawyers tear me apart on the stand, use my past against me, make it look like I deserved what happened?" Pritchard leaned forward, his expression serious. "I won't lie to you, ma'am. It will be difficult. Quick's defense will try to discredit you, suggest you're bitter or vindictive or making false claims for revenge. They'll drag up everything painful in your history and display it for a courtroom. It will be one of the hardest things you've ever done. But," Garrett interjected, "you won't be alone. We'll have multiple witnesses, documentary evidence, expert testimony about fraudulent contracts. Your story will be part of a larger pattern, not standing isolated where it can be easily dismissed. And we'll prepare you, help you understand what to expect, stand with you through the process." "And if we lose?" Alara asked. "Then at least we tried," Garrett said simply. "At least we forced Quick to defend himself in federal court, spent his resources, exposed his operation. Even if he walks free, we'll have made it harder for him to continue. That's something." Alara looked at Cole again, and he saw the question in her eyes. "What do you think?" "I think," Cole said carefully, "that this is your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. You want to testify? I'll stand beside you in that courtroom. You want to walk away and build your life without looking back? I'll respect that too. There's no wrong answer here, Alara. Only what feels right to you." She turned back to the marshals, drew a deep breath. "I need time to think about it. This isn't a decision I can make in one morning." "Of course," Garrett said, standing. "We're in town for the next week, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. Take the time you need. When you're ready, you can find us at the hotel. The marshals departed after finishing their coffee, leaving contact information and assurances that Alara's decision would be respected either way. Cole watched them ride back toward town, then turned to find Alara standing in the middle of the cabin, looking lost. 40 people, she said again, maybe more, all suffering because nobody stopped him. That's not on you, Cole said firmly. Quick's crimes are his responsibility, not yours. But if I don't testify, if I let fear keep me silent, then you're making the same choice thousands of people make every day when facing powerful men who've hurt them. It doesn't make you complicit. It makes you human. Alara sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. Cole pulled up a chair beside her, close, but not crowding. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. But strength doesn't mean doing everything that needs doing. It means knowing your limits and making choices you can live with. What would you do? She asked, looking up at him. If you were me? I'm not you, Cole said. I'm a man who carries a gun and a badge, who society gives authority to even when I don't deserve it. You're a woman who's been systematically broken down by men who claimed authority over you. Our perspectives aren't the same, and what I do isn't necessarily what you should do. But if you had to choose? Cole considered carefully before answering. If I had to choose, I'd ask myself one question. A year from now, which decision will let me sleep better? Testifying and facing whatever comes, or walking away and wondering if I could have made a difference. He paused. But that's me. You might have a completely different answer, and it would be just as valid. Alara nodded slowly, processing. I need to think. Then think. Take all the time you need. She stood, moved to the window, stared out at the white landscape. Cole let her have the silence, understanding that some decisions couldn't be rushed or influenced, only arrived at through internal wrestling. After a long while, Alara spoke without turning. When I was on that auction platform, I prayed for death. Not in a poetic way, not as dramatic relief. I just wanted it to be over. Wanted to stop existing, stop feeling, stop having to endure one more moment of being treated like I was less than human. Cole felt his chest tighten, but didn't interrupt. Then you bought my contract and brought me here, and I spent weeks waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for you to reveal what you really wanted, what all men really want from women they have power over. She turned to face him. But it never came. You just kept being decent, kept giving me choices, kept treating me like I mattered. And slowly, I started to remember who I used to be. Started to believe I could be a person again, not just a thing that happened to. Alara, let me finish, she said quietly. That woman on the auction platform, the one who wanted to die, she would have never considered testifying, would have been too broken, too afraid, too certain that nothing she did would matter. But the woman standing here now, the one you helped me become, she stopped, emotion thick in her voice. She thinks maybe she should try. Maybe she owes it to all those other people Quick destroyed. Maybe she's strong enough after all. You don't owe anyone anything, Cole reminded her. I know, but maybe I want to do it anyway. Maybe I want to stand up and say, this happened, it was wrong, and I survived anyway. Maybe that's the final piece of taking my life back. Cole stood, crossed to her. If you decide to do this, I'll be with you every step. In the courtroom, facing down Quick's lawyers, dealing with whatever comes after. You won't be alone. Promise? Promise. Alara leaned against him, and Cole wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tremors running through her body. Not weakness, but the physical manifestation of courage gathering itself for a fight. They stood like that for a long time, while outside the snow continued to fall and inside a decision slowly crystallized into certainty. The next morning, Alara walked into Dust Ridge beside Cole, her spine straight and her chin up, and told Deputy Marshal Garrett she would testify. The week that followed was a blur of activity. Garrett and his agents worked methodically, interviewing workers, examining contracts, building their case with the thoroughness of men who knew they'd only get one shot at taking down someone as slippery as Sullivan Quick. Alara spent hours going over her testimony, learning what to expect, how to answer questions without letting emotion derail her credibility. Cole attended every session, a silent presence in the corner of the hotel room Garrett had converted into a makeshift office. He watched Alara transform before his eyes, Not into someone different, but into a fuller version of who she'd always been. The schoolteacher who'd once stood in front of a classroom commanding respect. The woman who'd survived hell and come out with her mind intact. The survivor who was choosing to fight back instead of simply enduring. Quick caught wind of the investigation on the fourth day. Cole was in town when the auctioneer stormed into the sheriff's office, his face purple with rage. "You did this!" Quick snarled, slamming his hands on Cole's desk. "You brought federal marshals down on my legitimate business because of some grudge over that worthless woman." Cole looked up from the paperwork he'd been reviewing, his expression flat. "That woman has a name. Use it." "I don't give a damn about her name. She's a liar, a troublemaker, trying to destroy an honest businessman because she's bitter about her own failures." "Honest businessman," Cole repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "That what you call selling people based on fraudulent debts? Those debts were real, documented, legal. Then you should have no trouble defending yourself in federal court." Quick's eyes narrowed. "This is personal for you. You've developed feelings for her, haven't you? Let some broken whore twist you around her finger until you forgot your duty." Cole was out of his chair and across the desk before Quick could finish the sentence, his hand fisted in the auctioneer's collar, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the windows. "Choose your next words very carefully," Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying more menace than a shout. "Because if you finish that sentence, federal marshals or not, I'm going to throw you through that window and let the cold finish what I start." Quick paled, genuine fear flickering across his face. "You're assaulting me. I'll have your badge for this." "You're welcome to try." Cole released him with a shove. "Now get out of my office before I decide the paperwork isn't worth it." Quick straightened his coat with shaking hands, trying to recover some dignity. "This isn't over, Barrett. I've got friends, connections. When this farce of an investigation falls apart, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. A fool who threw away his career for a used-up woman nobody else wanted." "Out," Cole said flatly. Quick left, but his parting look promised retribution. Cole stood in the empty office, forcing his breathing to steady, his hands to unclench. The rage Quick had ignited still burned in his chest, but it was accompanied by something else. Certainty. Whatever it cost him, whatever threats Quick made, Cole knew he'd made the right choice in helping Alara find her voice again. That evening, he returned to the cabin to find Alara practicing her testimony out loud, pacing in front of the fire while reciting dates and details with the precision of someone who'd lived through every moment and wouldn't let anyone else rewrite her history. "How'd it go in town?" she asked, looking up as he entered. "Quick knows about the investigation. He's angry." "Angry enough to be dangerous?" Cole hung up his coat, considering. "Maybe. But the marshals are watching him closely. He makes a move against you or any other witness, he'll have federal charges piled on top of the fraud." Alara nodded, returning to her pacing. "Garrett says we'll likely go to trial within the month. Wants to move fast before Quick can hide assets or intimidate witnesses." "How are you feeling about it?" She stopped pacing, met his eyes. Terrified, determined, both at the same time. "That sounds about right." "Cole?" She hesitated, then continued. "What Quick said about you, about developing feelings for me, doesn't matter what Quick said." "It matters to me," Alara said quietly, "because I need to know if I'm dragging you down with me, if standing by me is going to cost you everything you've built here." Cole crossed to her, took her hands in his. "Listen to me. Whatever I feel for you, and yes, I have feelings for you, complicated ones I'm still figuring out, those feelings are my choice. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm walking this path beside you because I want to, because it's the right thing to do, and because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a responsibility and became someone I can't imagine my life without." Alara's breath caught. "Cole, I'm not asking you to feel the same way," he said quickly. "I'm not expecting anything. I just need you to know that whatever happens with this trial, whatever Quick threatens or the town thinks, I'm here because I choose to be. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because you matter to me." She searched his face, and whatever she found there made her eyes glisten with unshed tears. "I don't know what I feel yet. After everything that's happened, I'm not sure I know how to feel anything that isn't fear or survival or anger." "Then don't try to figure it out right now," Cole said. "Focus on the trial, on getting through this. We can sort out the rest later. And if there is no later? If Quick's lawyers destroy me on the stand, if the town turns on us completely, then we'll face it together. He squeezed her hands gently. That's what we do now, Ilara. We face things together. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest, and Cole wrapped his arms around her, providing shelter against the storm they both knew was coming. Outside, the wind picked up again, howling around the cabin's corners with an almost living fury. But inside, in the warm circle of firelight, two people held each other against the darkness, not as rescuer and rescued anymore, but as partners choosing to stand together against whatever the world threw at them. The trial date was set for 3 weeks hence, in a federal courthouse 2 days' ride from Dust Ridge. Garrett explained that the prosecution would call at least 15 witnesses, present hundreds of pages of fraudulent documentation, and systematically dismantle Quick's operation piece by piece. But Quick wasn't going down without a fight. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Aldrich, who'd come all the way from San Francisco, began a campaign of intimidation disguised as legal maneuvering. Witnesses were approached, offered money to recant. Workers still under contract were threatened with extended terms if they cooperated with federal authorities. And everywhere, whispers spread about the credibility of those testifying, particularly Ilara, whose past was dissected and weaponized in saloon conversations and general store gossip. Cole heard the talk every time he went into town, heard men speculating about what Ilara had done to survive, what she'd offered Cole in exchange for protection, whether her testimony could be trusted when she'd spread her legs for anyone who'd feed her. It took every ounce of self-control he possessed not to break jaws and arrest half the town for slander. Instead, he documented everything: who was spreading lies, who was clearly working on Quick's behalf to poison the jury pool, who was actively intimidating witnesses. He passed it all to Garrett, who added it to the growing pile of evidence that Quick's operation extended beyond simple fraud into conspiracy and obstruction of justice. 2 weeks before the trial, things escalated. Cole was checking the perimeter of his property, a nightly routine he'd established since Quick's threats, when he found fresh horse tracks leading toward the cabin from the east, a direction nobody should be approaching from unless they were trying to avoid being seen from the main trail. His hand went to his gun as he followed the tracks, every sense on high alert. They circled the cabin at a distance, as if someone had been watching, then headed back the way they'd come. Scouting. Someone had been surveying his home, learning the layout, planning something. Cole returned to the cabin to find Ilara reading by the fire, seemingly peaceful, unaware of the danger circling closer. "We need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. She looked up, immediately sensing his tension. "What happened?" "Someone was watching the cabin tonight. Professional work, staying out of rifle range, learning our patterns." The color drained from Ilara's face. "Quick?" "Probably someone he hired. Quick's smart enough not to do his own dirty work." Cole moved to the window, checking the sight lines. "We need to take precautions. Starting tonight, you don't go outside alone. We keep rifles loaded and ready. And if I'm not here and you see anyone approaching, you get to the root cellar and stay there until I come back or the marshals arrive." "You think he'd actually try to hurt me before the trial?" "I think he's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things." Cole turned to face her. "I'm not trying to scare you, but I need you to understand the danger. You're the strongest witness they have. If something happened to you before the trial, the case would be weaker," Ilara finished quietly. "They might not be able to convict." "Exactly." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then with a calmness that surprised him. "Show me again how to shoot in the dark, how to aim by sound instead of sight, how to protect myself if you're not here." So Cole spent the next 2 hours teaching her night shooting, sound recognition, how to use cover effectively. Ilara learned with the same fierce concentration she brought to everything, asking questions, practicing until her movements became instinctive. "You're a good student," Cole observed as they finally came back inside, both chilled from the night air. "I had a good teacher," Ilara said, setting the rifle carefully beside the door, "and strong motivation to survive." "It won't come to that," Cole said, though he couldn't promise with complete certainty. "Garrett's got men watching Quick. If he makes a move, they'll know." "But they can't watch everywhere all the time." "No," Cole admitted. "They can't." Ilara moved to the fire, holding her hands toward the warmth. I keep thinking about that auction platform, how empty I felt, how certain I was that nothing good would ever happen again. And now here I am, about to testify in federal court, learning to shoot in the dark, planning to face down the man who sold me like I was livestock. She turned to look at Cole. How did I get here? You chose to fight instead of surrender. You chose to believe you deserved better. You chose to trust, even when trust had been weaponized against you. I chose to accept help from a stubborn sheriff who didn't know when to mind his own business, Ilara said, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. That too, Cole agreed. She crossed to him, and in the firelight he could see the changes that had occurred over the past months. Not in her appearance, though she'd filled out and her eyes had lost some of that haunted emptiness, but in how she carried herself. There was strength there now, purpose, the bearing of someone who'd decided her story wasn't over yet. Cole, she said quietly, when this is over, when the trial's done, and Quick is either convicted or walks free, what happens then? What do you want to happen? I want... She stopped, struggling with words. I want to stay here with you, not because I'm afraid to be alone or because I owe you or because I don't have anywhere else to go, but because when I think about my future now, you're in it. This cabin, this life we're building, it feels like home. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. Ilara, I'm not saying I'm ready for everything that might mean, she said quickly. I'm still putting pieces back together, still learning how to be a whole person again. But I want to try. With you. If you'll have me. If I'll have you, Sitz, Cole repeated, something between a laugh and a sob catching in his throat. Ilara, I'd be honored, privileged, happy beyond words to build a life with you, at whatever pace you need, in whatever form it takes. She reached up, touching his face with tentative fingers. I care about you. I'm not sure I know how to love anyone yet, after everything. But I care. And I think, given time, it could become something more. Then we take the time, Cole said, covering her hand with his. We've got nothing but time. Ilara smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, the kind that lit up her whole face. First we survived the trial. First we survived the trial, Cole agreed. And then, because the moment felt right and they'd both been dancing around it for weeks, he leaned down and kissed her gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to say no, to maintain whatever boundaries she needed. But Ilara didn't pull away. She leaned into the kiss, her arms coming around his neck, and for a moment the danger and fear and uncertainty all fell away, leaving just two people finding something precious and unexpected in each other's brokenness. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard, foreheads resting together. That was... Ilara started. Yeah, Cole agreed. We should probably... Definitely. They stood there, neither quite willing to break the moment, until the fire popped and reality crashed back in, the trial looming, threats circling, danger stalking ever closer. But for just that one moment, in the warm glow of firelight, two survivors had found something worth protecting even more than their individual lives. They'd found each other. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The kiss changed things between them in ways both subtle and profound. Over the following days, they moved around each other with a new kind of intimacy, not physical necessarily, though their hands found reasons to touch more often, but emotional. The walls Ilara had built for survival were coming down brick by careful brick, and Cole found himself sharing parts of his own past he'd kept locked away for years. On a particularly cold evening, 5 days before they were due to leave for the trial, they sat together by the fire, Ilara's head resting against Cole's shoulder while he read aloud from a book of poetry she'd found on his shelf. I didn't take you for a poetry reader, she said when he paused to turn a page. My mother's, Cole said quietly. Only thing I have left of her. She died when I was 12, left me this, and a tendency to see the world as more than just survival. Ilara shifted to look at him. You never talk about your family. Not much to tell. Mother died young, father drank himself to death a few years later. I raised myself mostly, learned early that law was just a word until someone enforced it. He closed the book, ran his fingers over the worn cover. Guess that's why I became a sheriff. Thought if I could be the kind of lawman I needed when I was young, maybe it would balance the scales somehow. Did it? Cole considered. Not the way I expected. Turns out enforcing law in places like Dust Ridge means making compromises, looking the other way, protecting people who use that protection to hurt others. Wasn't what I signed up for. So why stay? Because leaving means someone worse takes the job, someone who won't even pretend to care about justice. He looked at her. And because sometimes, once in a while, you get to actually make a difference. Like buying a woman at an auction and giving her a chance to reclaim her life. Alara's eyes glistened. You gave me more than a chance. You gave me a reason to want to reclaim it. Before Cole could respond, the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast shattered the intimacy. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, positioning himself between Alara and the door. Get to the bedroom, he said quietly. If shooting starts, go out the back window and run for the Henricks place. Don't look back. Cole, now Alara. She grabbed the second rifle and retreated, but Cole noticed she positioned herself in the bedroom doorway where she could still see and shoot if needed. Stubborn woman. The rider pulled up hard outside, and Cole recognized Deputy Marshal Garrett's voice calling out, Barrett! It's Garrett! Got news! Cole lowered the rifle slightly, but didn't fully relax until he'd opened the door and confirmed Garrett's identity in the lamplight. The marshal looked like he'd ridden hard, his face windburned and tense. What happened? Cole asked, letting him inside. Garrett nodded to Alara, who'd emerged from the bedroom, then pulled a folded paper from his coat. Quick made his move. Not against the witnesses, against the evidence. Fire broke out at his office tonight. Whole building went up in flames. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Cole's jaw tightened. How much did we lose? Most of the original contracts, ledgers, correspondence, anything that was stored at Quick's place of business. Garrett's expression was grim. But Quick didn't know we'd already made copies of everything we could get our hands on. Federal procedure, always duplicate key evidence. We've still got enough to prosecute, but it weakens our case. Shows a jury that the original documents are gone. Lets Quick's lawyer argue we might have altered the copies. The bastard, Cole muttered. There's more. Garrett accepted the coffee Alara pressed into his hands with a grateful nod. Quick's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss based on unreliable evidence. Claims the copies could be fraudulent, that without originals we can't prove chain of custody. Judge denied it, but it's a preview of their strategy. They're going to attack the integrity of every document, every piece of evidence, every witness. Alara sank into a chair, her face pale. They're going to destroy us on the stand. They're going to try, Garrett said firmly, but we've been preparing for this. We have witness testimony that corroborates the documents. We have multiple victims telling the same story of fraudulent debts and coerced contracts. We have Quick's own pattern of behavior spanning years. The fire actually helps us in one way. It's evidence of consciousness of guilt. Innocent men don't burn down their own businesses the week before trial. Unless they claim it was an accident, Cole said. Already did. Quick's telling everyone it was a lamp knocked over by accident. Pure tragedy. Terrible timing. Garrett's expression turned sardonic. Terrible timing that happened at 3 in the morning when nobody was around, and somehow the lamp managed to fall in multiple rooms simultaneously. Will the jury believe that? Alara asked. Depends on the jury. That's why witness testimony is more crucial than ever. The documents tell one story, but you, all of you survivors, you give that story a human face. You make it real. Garrett leaned forward, his voice intent. I need to know you're still willing to testify, because if you're not, I understand. This just got significantly harder. Alara looked at Cole, and he saw the fear there, the uncertainty, but he also saw determination burning underneath. I'll testify, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Quick can burn every piece of paper in the territory. He can't burn the truth, and he can't burn my memory of what he did. Garrett smiled, genuine respect in his expression. That's exactly the spirit we need. The other witnesses are holding firm too. Quick's going to learn that some things can't be intimidated or destroyed. After Garrett left, promising to return the next day with updated trial preparations, Cole and Alara stood together at the window, watching the marshal disappear into the darkness. I'm scared, Alara admitted quietly. I know. Not just of the trial, of what comes after. If we lose, Quick walks free and everyone who testified becomes a target. If we win, we've made a powerful enemies. Quick's connections, the people who profited from his operation, everyone invested in maintaining the system. She turned to face him. Either way, our lives get harder. Cole pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. Then we face hard together, like we've been doing. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. We stand for what's right, accept the consequences, and refuse to let bastards like Quick win by making us too afraid to fight. Alara was quiet for a moment, then pulled back to look at him. When this is over, when the trial's done and we know where we stand, will you marry me? The question hit Cole like a physical blow. What? The council wanted you to marry me or send me away. You told them to go to hell, and I love that you did. She took his hands in hers. But I'm asking now, not because anyone's forcing it, not because of propriety or pressure. I'm asking because I want to, because I want to build a life with you officially, legally, in a way that no one can question or take away. Alara, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. There's a difference. Her grip tightened. I'm not asking you to answer now. I'm asking you to think about it. When the trial's over, when we've survived whatever Quick throws at us, when we're standing on the other side, ask me then, and I'll say yes. Cole felt emotion welling up in his chest, threatening to overwhelm him. You're sure? Because marriage is permanent, and you're still healing, still figuring out who you are after everything. I'm figuring out who I am with you, Alara interrupted, and I like who that person is. She's stronger than I thought possible, braver, more willing to fight for what matters. She smiled, tentative but real. She's someone I want to be, and she wants to spend her life with a stubborn sheriff who doesn't know when to mind his own business. Cole laughed, the sound catching in his throat. When you put it that way, so you'll think about it? I don't need to think about it, Cole said, cupping her face in his hands. Yes, when this is over, when you're standing on the other side, having conquered your demons and testified against the man who tried to break you, I'll ask. And you'll say yes. And we'll build something that lasts. Alara's smile transformed her face, making her look younger, lighter, like the shadows that had haunted her for so long were finally beginning to recede. It's a deal, Sheriff Barrett. It's a deal, future Mrs. Barrett. They sealed it with the kiss that felt like a promise, like a declaration of war against everything that had tried to destroy them, like the beginning of something that might actually survive the Frontier's attempts to grind it to dust. The days before departure for the trial passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Garrett brought updated witness lists, coached Alara on cross-examination tactics, walked her through what to expect from Quick's lawyer. Cole watched her transform under the pressure, not breaking, but tempering like steel in a forge, becoming harder and sharper and more dangerous to those who'd underestimated her. The night before they were due to leave, Marcus Thorne appeared at the cabin door just after sunset. Cole answered with his hand on his gun, surprised to see the merchant standing there looking uncomfortable and vaguely ashamed. Thorne, what do you want? To apologize, Thorne said, the words clearly difficult for him. And to warn you. Cole studied him suspiciously. About? May I come in? This isn't a conversation for the porch. Cole led him inside, where Alara was packing supplies for the journey. She stiffened when she saw Thorne, but didn't retreat. Say your piece, Cole said. Thorne removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I came to apologize for my behavior when you first brought Miss Vance home. I said some things, implied others, that were uncharitable and wrong. The council's pressure to maintain appearances, it made me forget that propriety matters less than decency. Apology noted, Cole said flatly. What's the warning? Quick's planning something for the trial. I don't know exactly what, but I've heard talk. Bribes being offered to jurors, witnesses being threatened with jail time on trumped-up charges, some hired guns asking questions about the route you'll take to the courthouse. Thorne looked genuinely worried. The man is desperate and dangerous. He knows if this trial goes against him, he loses everything. Why tell us this? Alara asked. You've supported Quick's operation from the beginning. Supported it by looking the other way, yes. Because it was profitable, and I'm a businessman first. Thorne met her eyes. But I'm not a monster, Miss Vance. Burning down buildings, threatening witnesses, potentially hiring killers, that's beyond commerce. That's criminal conspiracy, and I'll not be part of it. Cole considered whether to trust this sudden change of heart. decided it didn't matter. The warning was valuable, regardless of Thorne's motivations. Garrett knows about the threats. We're taking precautions. Take more, Thorne said urgently. Quick has money and connections. He could have men waiting anywhere along the route. If something happened to Miss Vance before the trial, nothing's going to happen to her, Cole said with absolute certainty. I'll make sure of it. Thorne nodded, replacing his hat. For what it's worth, Sheriff, you did the right thing. Helping her, standing up to the council, refusing to bend. Dust Ridge needs more men like you, even if we don't always appreciate it. He turned to Alara. Good luck at the trial, Miss Vance. I hope you bury the bastard. After Thorne left, Alara let out a long breath. That was unexpected. People surprise you sometimes, Cole said. Question is whether he's being genuine or if Quick sent him to plant false information, make us paranoid about the route. Does it matter? We were already being careful. True. Cole checked the rifle by the door, verified the ammunition was ready. Tomorrow we leave 2 hours before dawn, take the northern route instead of the main road. Garrett's sending 2 marshals to escort us. We'll be fine. You keep saying that like you can make it true by force of will. Worked so far, hasn't it? Alara smiled despite her obvious nerves. You're impossible. And you're stuck with me. Best decision I ever made. They finished packing in comfortable silence, then lay together in front of the fire. Not in the bedroom, not intimate in that way yet, but close, connected, drawing strength from each other's presence. Cole ran his fingers through her hair, feeling her gradually relax against him. Tell me what happens after, Alara said quietly. After the trial. After we win. After we come back here. Tell me what our life looks like. Well, Cole said thoughtfully, we get married. Small ceremony, just us and whoever we want there. Maybe the Henricks, Garrett, if he's still around. Nothing fancy. I'd like that. What else? We fix up the cabin, add a room, maybe 2, plant that garden properly in spring, your expertise, not mine. Get some chickens, maybe a milk cow, build something sustainable. Children? Alara's voice was tentative. Cole's hand stilled in her hair. If you want them. When you're ready, no pressure. I think I might want them. Eventually. After I've had time to be just me, just us, without obligations or expectations. She tilted her head to look at him. Is that selfish? It's honest. And no, it's not selfish to want time to heal before taking on more responsibility. You'd be a good father, Alara observed, and you'd be a good mother, when and if you're ready. She settled back against him, satisfied. Tell me more. We become the annoying couple everyone points to as an example of improbable happiness. We grow old together, arguing about books and whose turn it is to feed the chickens. We build something that lasts, something that matters, something that proves people can survive hell and still create heaven. That sounds nice, Alara murmured, her eyes drifting closed. Really nice. Cole held her while she slept, watching the fire burn down to embers, thinking about the future they'd planned and the gauntlet they had to run to reach it. Tomorrow they'd leave for the trial, ride 2 days through dangerous territory with men potentially hunting them, face down Quick and his lawyers in federal court, and gamble everything on the hope that justice actually existed. It should have terrified him. Instead, Cole felt strangely calm, because whatever came, they'd face it together. And together, they were stronger than anything the frontier could throw at them. He believed that with every fiber of his being. They left before dawn as planned, Cole and Alara riding side by side with Deputy Marshals Pritchard and Wells flanking them. The northern route was longer but less predictable, winding through rough country where ambushes would be harder to stage effectively. The first day passed without incident, though Cole's instincts screamed danger at every blind curve and narrow pass. They camped that night in a defensible position, taking turns on watch, sleeping in shifts with rifles ready. The second day brought the confrontation Cole had been expecting. They were 3 hours from the courthouse when riders appeared on the ridge above them, 4 men, spread out, blocking the pass ahead. Cole recognized the setup instantly, forced them to stop, create a kill zone, eliminate the witnesses before they could testify. Ambush, he said quietly, his hand moving to his gun. Pritchard swore, scanning the terrain. We can't go back, probably have more behind us. Can't go around, cliffs on both sides. So we go through, Cole said. Wells looked at him like he was insane. There's 4 of them, 4 of us. But they've got high ground and cover. They've also got orders not to hurt the marshals if possible, Cole said, working through the tactical situation. Quick can't afford to kill federal agents. Too much heat, too many questions. They're here for Alara and maybe me, which means you two can approach openly while Alara and I circle around on foot. That's suicide, Alara said. No, that's using our advantages. They're expecting us to charge through or retreat. They're not expecting us to split up and flank them. Pritchard considered, then nodded slowly. It could work, if we time it right. They planned quickly, then executed. The marshals rode forward openly, hands visible, calling out that they wanted to talk. The gunmen's attention focused on them, just as Cole had predicted. Meanwhile, Cole and Ilara dismounted and worked their way up the rocky slope on foot, using every bit of cover the terrain offered. It was hard going, especially for Ilara in a dress, but she kept pace without complaint, her rifle held ready. They were halfway up when one of the gunmen spotted them and shouted a warning. The ambush disintegrated into chaos, the gunmen trying to reposition, the marshals using the distraction to take cover and return fire, Cole and Ilara pressing their advantage. Cole dropped the first gunman with a shot that took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and out of the fight. Ilara fired at another, her bullet striking close enough to make him dive behind a boulder. The remaining 2 abandoned their position and ran for their horses. The whole engagement lasted maybe 90 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 1 gunman was wounded, 2 had fled, and 1 lay dead, killed by Pritchard's rifle when he'd tried to shoot Cole in the back. Cole checked the wounded man, recognized him as one of Quick's regular hired muscle. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Go to hell. Already there, Cole said. Question is whether you want to add murder conspiracy to your charges or cooperate with federal marshals and maybe see daylight again before you're 60. The gunman's eyes flicked to Pritchard, calculating odds. Quick. Said to stop the witnesses from reaching the courthouse. Whatever it took. You hear that, Marshal? Cole said. I did indeed, Pritchard said, already writing in his notebook. Mr. Quick just added attempted murder of federal witnesses to his charges. They left the wounded gunman bound for local law to collect, took the dead man's body as evidence, and rode hard for the courthouse. By the time they arrived, exhausted and dust-covered but alive, the sun was setting on the day before trial. Garrett met them at the courthouse steps, his expression grim when he saw the body. What happened? Quick sent men to stop us, Cole said. Didn't work. Obviously. Garrett's eyes found Ilara, who was pale but composed. You all right, ma'am? I shot at a man today, Ilara said quietly. Missed, but I tried to kill him to protect myself and others. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Feel however you need to feel, Garrett said. But feel it tomorrow after you've testified. Right now, I need you focused and ready. Quick just escalated this into something bigger than fraud. We're going to bury him. The trial began at 9 the next morning in a federal courthouse that smelled of old wood and older justice. Cole sat in the gallery, watching Ilara take the witness stand with her spine straight and her chin up, looking nothing like the broken woman he'd bought at auction months ago. Quick's lawyer, Aldrich, was everything Cole had expected, smooth, confident, ready to eviscerate witnesses with surgical precision. But he hadn't counted on Ilara's quiet strength, her refusal to be intimidated or shamed. Miss Vance, Aldrich began, his tone dripping false sympathy, you claim my client sold you into servitude based on fraudulent debts. Yet you have no documentation of these supposed debts, do you? The documentation burned in the fire your client set, Ilara said calmly. Convenient timing. Objection, Aldrich snapped. Witness is speculating about the cause of the fire. Sustained, the judge said. Miss Vance, stick to what you know personally. I know that, mister. Quick told me I owed $300 for Passage West that I never agreed to. I know that debt somehow grew to $800 through fees and interest I never saw documented. I know he sold my contract 7 times over 2 years, each time to men who used me and discarded me like property. I know all of this because I lived it. Aldrich shifted tactics. And during this time, did you ever seek help from local authorities? File a complaint? Attempt to escape? I tried twice. First time I was caught and beaten. My contract was extended another year as penalty. Second time, the local sheriff, Not Sheriff Barrett, his predecessor, returned me to my contract holder and took payment for his trouble. So you're saying law enforcement was complicit? I'm saying law enforcement on the frontier serves those who pay them, not those who need protection. Cole felt pride swell in his chest. She was magnificent, calm, clear, unshakable. Aldrich pressed harder. Miss Vance, is it true that you entered into a relationship with Sheriff Barrett shortly after he purchased your contract? Sheriff Barrett freed me from my contract. He didn't purchase me. He purchased a piece of paper, which he immediately destroyed. Nevertheless, you now live with him, unmarried, in his cabin. Some might say you traded one form of servitude for another. Some might say that, Alara agreed, her voice turning cold. Those people would be wrong. Sheriff Barrett gave me freedom, choice, and respect, things your client tried to take from me. What I choose to do with that freedom is none of your concern. But it speaks to your credibility, doesn't it? A woman living in sin with the local sheriff, testifying against a businessman who burned his own building to destroy evidence, Alara interrupted. Who hired gunmen to murder me before I could testify? Who has systematically exploited and sold human beings for profit while hiding behind legal paperwork? She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Aldrich. My living situation has nothing to do with my credibility. The truth does. And the truth is that your client is a criminal who deserves to be in prison. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel for order. And Aldrich, for the first time, looked uncertain. The trial continued for 3 more days. Witness after witness took the stand, each telling similar stories of fraudulent debts, coerced contracts, systematic exploitation. The prosecution presented the copied documents, testimony from handwriting experts confirming their authenticity, evidence that the fire had been deliberately set with accelerants in multiple locations. Quick sat through it all with an expression of offended dignity, as if he couldn't believe anyone would question his integrity. On the 4th day, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of contract fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of labor trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded. Quick's face went white, then red, then purple with rage. He lunged toward the witness area, screaming threats at Alara before marshals subdued him. Cole was already moving, positioning himself between Quick and Alara, his hand on his gun. But the marshals had Quick in custody, were dragging him away, still screaming about injustice and conspiracies and how he'd been destroyed by lies. Alara stood frozen in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but from relief so intense it manifested as physical release. "It's over," she whispered when Cole reached her. "He's actually going to prison. 20 years minimum, according to Garrett," Cole said, pulling her into his arms. "He'll die there. He'll never hurt anyone again." She collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with sobs. Cole held her while she released months of tension, fear, and suppressed trauma, letting her cry without trying to fix it or stop it. Around them, other witnesses were celebrating, embracing, crying their own tears of relief and justice. Garrett was shaking hands with the prosecution team, looking satisfied and exhausted. Eventually, Alara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah," Cole said softly. "We can go home." They left the courthouse as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ride back to Dust Ridge took 2 days, but this time they traveled without fear, without looking over their shoulders, without the weight of impending testimony hanging over them. When the cabin finally came into view, Alara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I've never been so happy to see a building in my life." "Welcome home," Cole said. They dismounted and for a moment just stood there looking at the cabin, humble, isolated, imperfect, but theirs. A place where they'd built something worth protecting. A place where healing had begun and would continue. Alara turned to Cole, her eyes bright with emotion and determination and hope. "Ask me." Cole understood immediately. "You sure, right now?" "Right now, right here. This is the moment, standing on the other side of everything that tried to break us, having survived and fought and won. Ask me." Cole took her hands in his, looked into eyes that had been empty when he first saw them, but now burned with life and purpose and love.
Ilara Vance, will you marry me? Yes, she said, smiling through tears. Yes, absolutely, yes.
He kissed her there in the fading light, and it felt like victory and promise, and the beginning of something that would outlast the frontier's attempts to grind it to dust. When they finally broke apart, Ilara laughed, a sound of pure joy. We did it. We actually did it. We did, Cole agreed. Together. Always together, Ilara said. From now on. And standing there in front of the cabin they'd turned into a home, two survivors who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build toward light, they began planning a future that belonged only to them. The frontier had tried to break them. Instead, they'd broken its hold on their lives and created something stronger than either could have built alone. They'd created a partnership worth keeping, and that was worth everything. The first week after their return felt like learning to breathe in a world where the air had suddenly changed composition. Cole and Ilara moved through their days with a lightness neither had experienced before, not the absence of weight, but the presence of something worth carrying. They were engaged now, officially committed to building a future together, and every small decision became part of that larger construction. Ilara spent her mornings working in the garden plot, clearing away the frost-killed remains of Cole's failed attempts and preparing the soil for spring planting. Cole watched her from the porch sometimes, coffee in hand, marveling at how she'd transformed from the hollow-eyed woman on the auction platform into someone who knelt in dirt planning seasons ahead with quiet confidence. "You're staring again," Ilara called without looking up, a smile in her voice. "Can't help it," Cole admitted.
"Still can't quite believe you're real. Very real, very dirty, and very hungry." She stood, brushing soil from her hands. "What are the chances you've started lunch?" "0. I was too busy admiring my future wife." Ilara laughed, that full, genuine sound that still felt like a small miracle every time Cole heard it. She climbed the porch steps, stood on her toes to kiss him, despite the dirt smudged on her cheek. Future wife, who's going to starve if present fiancé doesn't contribute to meal preparation. Fair point. They worked together in the kitchen, a practice dance they developed over months of sharing space. Cole sliced bread while Ilara heated leftover stew, their movements synchronized without conscious thought. It was in these mundane moments that Cole felt the truth of what they'd built. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the simple comfort of partnership. "I've been thinking about the wedding," Ilara said as they sat down to eat. "Nothing elaborate. Maybe just us and the Henriks as witnesses. Garrett, if he's still in the territory?" "Sounds perfect to me. When?" "Spring, after the last frost, when the garden started growing and the world feels new again." She paused. "Unless that's too long to wait." Cole reached across the table, took her hand. "We've got the rest of our lives, Ilara. A few months to plan properly isn't too long. Besides, gives you time to be absolutely certain you want to tie yourself to a stubborn sheriff with questionable cooking skills." "I'm certain now," she said softly. "But I appreciate the time anyway. I want to stand at that altar, or wherever we do this, and know that I'm choosing you from a place of strength, not need. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of a wagon approaching. Cole's hand went instinctively to his gun before he recognized the Henrik's old mare pulling the familiar buckboard. Thomas Henrik waved as they drew near, his wife Sarah beside him. "Sheriff Barrett, Miss Vance," Thomas called, pulling the wagon to a stop. "Got a moment?" Cole and Ilara emerged onto the porch, curious. The Henriks were good neighbors, but they rarely visited without purpose. "What can we do for you?" Cole asked. Sarah Henrik climbed down from the wagon, carrying a basket that smelled of fresh bread. "We heard about the trial, about what you both went through. Wanted to bring by something and say—" She paused, searching for words. "Say that we're proud to call you neighbors. What you did, standing up to Quick like that, it took real courage." "Wasn't just courage," Ilara said quietly. "It was survival and justice." "Either way, it matters," Thomas said, joining his wife. "Quick's operation touched a lot of lives out here. Folks who lost family members to his contracts, people too afraid to speak up. You gave them a voice, gave them hope that maybe the law actually works sometimes." Cole felt his throat tighten. "Appreciate you saying so." "We also heard," Sarah continued with a knowing smile, "that congratulations are in order? Wedding bells in the future?"
Alara's hand found Cole's automatically. Spring wedding, small ceremony. You're both invited if you'll come. Wouldn't miss it, Sarah said warmly. About time this stubborn sheriff found someone who could keep up with him. They visited for an hour, sharing coffee and Sarah's bread, talking about crops and weather and the small news that made up frontier life. When the Henricks finally departed, Alara stood beside Cole watching them go, her expression thoughtful. What is it? Cole asked. I was just thinking about community, she said. How I thought I'd lost it when everything fell apart back east. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe community isn't just where you start. It's what you build with people who choose to stand beside you. The Henricks are good people. They are. And so are you. She turned to face him fully. You gave me more than freedom, Cole. You gave me a place to belong again. A place where I'm not defined by what happened to me, but by who I'm choosing to become. Cole pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. You gave yourself that. I just provided the space for it to happen. Then we gave it to each other, Alara decided. Seems fair. The following week brought Cole into town for sheriff's business, and he returned to find Alara had company, Deputy Marshal Garrett sitting at their kitchen table, papers spread before him. Garrett, Cole said, hanging his hat. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Got some business to discuss, Garrett said, standing to shake Cole's hand. With both of you, actually. Mind if we talk? They settled around the table, and Garrett pulled out an official-looking document. The federal prosecution of Quick opened up a lot of questions about labor trafficking in the territories. The government's establishing a task force to investigate similar operations, shut them down before they can grow to Quick's scale. They want experienced people leading it, people who understand the frontier and won't be bought off. And, Cole prompted, and I recommended you for deputy marshal, federal position, good pay, real authority to make changes across the territory instead of just one town. Garrett's expression was earnest. You've proven you can't be corrupted, that you'll stand up for what's right even when it costs you. That's rare out here, Barrett. The government needs more men like you. Cole felt Alara's eyes on him, could sense her tension even though she stayed quiet. That's a generous offer, he said carefully. But I've got responsibilities here. A town, he glanced at Alara. A life I'm building. I know, which is why I'm also offering a position for Miss Vance. Garrett turned to her. We need someone who understands the victim's perspective, who can interview survivors and help them feel safe coming forward. Someone with intelligence, compassion, and the courage to face down the ugliness we'll be investigating. Your testimony at Quick's trial showed me you have all of those qualities. Alara's eyes widened. You want me to work for the federal marshals? As a consultant and victim advocate, yes. You'd be the first woman in that role, which won't be easy. But I think you're up for it. Silence filled the cabin while Cole and Alara processed this unexpected offer. It was tempting, a chance to do real good on a larger scale, to help others the way Alara had been helped. But it would also mean leaving Dust Ridge, traveling extensively, facing danger regularly. Can we think about it? Cole asked finally. Of course. I'm in town for another week, gathering evidence on some other cases. Take the time you need. Talk it through. Garrett stood, gathering his papers. But I hope you'll seriously consider it. You two together could save a lot of lives. After Garrett left, Cole and Alara sat in heavy silence, both wrestling with the implications. What do you think? Alara asked finally. I think it's a hell of an opportunity. Chance to make a real difference, not just maintain order in one corrupt town. But it means leaving this place. The cabin, the life we've started building, means putting ourselves in danger constantly, never settling long enough to have that garden you're planning, or the chickens we talked about. Alara nodded slowly. Part of me wants to say yes immediately, wants to turn my pain into purpose, help others escape what I went through. But another part, she stopped, looking around the cabin. Another part wants to stay here, marry you in spring, build something quiet and peaceful and ours. I've spent so long just surviving, maybe I deserve some time just living. You deserve whatever you want, Cole said firmly. There's no wrong answer here, except there kind of is, isn't there? Alara met his eyes. Because if we say no, others suffer. People Quick's replacements will exploit.
Victims who won't have anyone fighting for them because we chose comfort over duty. That's not fair to yourself. You don't owe the world your continued trauma just because you survived yours. I know, but knowing that and feeling it are different things. She stood, paced to the window. What do you want, Cole? Really want, if duty and obligation didn't factor in? Cole considered carefully before answering. I want to wake up every morning next to you. I want to grow old in a place we built together. I want simple, quiet, boring domestic happiness after years of violence and complexity. He paused. But I also know myself. If we turn this down and I spend the next 20 years wondering if we could have made a difference, if people suffered because we chose comfort, that'll eat at me. And eventually, it'll poison what we're trying to build. Alara turned from the window, tears on her cheeks. I hate that you're right. I hate that doing the right thing means sacrificing the life I just started believing I deserved. Hey, Cole crossed to her, wiping away tears with gentle thumbs. Who says we have to choose all or nothing? What if we told Garrett yes, but with conditions? We work for the task force for 2 years, help establish it properly, train others. Then we come back here, settle down, build that quiet life. We get both, purpose now, peace later. You think he'd agree to that? Only one way to find out. They found Garrett at the hotel the next morning, presented their counteroffer over breakfast. The marshal listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking clarifying questions before nodding slowly. 2 years is actually perfect, he said. Long enough to establish procedures, shut down the worst operations, train permanent staff. After that, the task force should be self-sustaining. He extended his hand. We have a deal, if you want it. Cole looked at Alara, saw his own mixture of trepidation and determination reflected in her eyes. Together they shook Garrett's hand. We have a deal, Cole confirmed. The next months passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Cole trained a temporary replacement as Dust Ridge's sheriff, a young deputy named Morrison who'd proven honest, if inexperienced. Alara studied federal law, victim advocacy techniques, investigative procedures. They sold most of their possessions, keeping only what they could carry or store at the Henricks farm. And they got married. The wedding took place on a clear spring morning, with wildflowers blooming across the ridge and the creek running full from snowmelt. Reverend Walsh from Dust Ridge officiated, one of the few town figures who'd supported Cole and Alara from the beginning. The Henricks served as witnesses, along with Garrett and several other survivors from Quick's trial who'd traveled to attend. Alara wore a simple dress Sarah Henrick had helped her make, white cotton with delicate embroidery. Cole wore his best suit, the one he'd bought years ago for court appearances and buried his father in. They stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, hands joined, making promises that felt both ancient and new. Do you, Cole Barrett, take Alara Vance to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Cole said, his voice steady and sure. And do you, Alara Vance, take Cole Barrett to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Alara's eyes shone with tears and joy. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory and the grace of the Almighty, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole cupped Alara's face in his hands, kissed her with all the tenderness and promise he possessed. She kissed him back, and in that moment, the frontier ceased to exist. There was only them, only this choice they'd made, only the future they'd promised to build together. When they broke apart, their small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah Henrick cried happy tears. Garrett beamed like a proud father. And the other survivors, people who'd suffered under Quick's system and triumphed, celebrated not just a wedding, but everything it represented: survival, healing, the possibility of happiness after horror. The reception was held at the cabin, simple but joyful. Thomas Henrick played fiddle while people danced in the clearing. Sarah had brought enough food to feed twice their number. Someone produced whiskey, and toasts were made to the happy couple, to justice, to new beginnings. As the sun set and the party wound down, Cole and Alara stood together on their porch, watching their guests depart in the golden light. How does it feel? Cole asked. Being Mrs. Barrett. Right, Alara said simply. It feels right. She turned to him, took his hands. I know we're leaving soon, starting this new chapter with Garrett's task force. Part of me is terrified, but another part, the part that survived everything and came out stronger, that part is ready. Ready to fight for others, to make sure what happened to me doesn't keep happening to vulnerable people. We'll make a difference, Cole said. Together. 2 years, Alara reminded him. Then we come home. Back to this cabin, this life, the quiet future we promised ourselves. 2 years, Cole agreed, and then we build everything we've dreamed about. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, making love for the first time with gentle care and mutual reverence. It was awkward and sweet and perfect. Not the practiced passion of experienced lovers, but the fumbling tenderness of two people learning each other's bodies and hearts simultaneously. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Alara's head on Cole's chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. I never thought I'd have this, Alara whispered. After everything that happened, I thought I was too broken for intimacy, too damaged for love. But with you, her voice caught. With you, I'm not broken. I'm just healing, and that's enough. You were always enough, Cole said fiercely. Even on that auction platform, even at your lowest point, you were enough. I just helped you remember it. We helped each other remember, Alara corrected. You were as lost as I was, in your own way. Drowning in compromises and moral calculations, forgetting why you became a lawman in the first place. We saved each other. Cole couldn't argue with that. She was right. They'd saved each other, not through grand heroics, but through daily choices to be decent, to care, to refuse to let the frontier's cruelty become their standard. They left Dust Ridge 2 weeks after the wedding, saddlebags packed with essentials, riding toward Denver and the federal marshal's office that would become their base of operations. The cabin stood empty behind them, secured and waiting for their return. It'll still be here, Alara said, looking back one last time before the ridge hid it from view. When we come home, it'll be waiting. Yes, it will, Cole agreed. And so will everything we've planned. The garden, the chickens, the quiet, boring happiness. I'm looking forward to boring, Alara said with a slight smile. 2 years of excitement, then a lifetime of peaceful tedium. Sounds perfect to me. The 2 years that followed were anything but boring. Cole and Alara worked with Garrett's task force across 3 territories, investigating labor trafficking operations, freeing victims, bringing criminals to justice. Alara proved invaluable in her role, her personal experience and natural compassion helping survivors feel safe enough to testify. Cole's combination of frontier knowledge and incorruptible integrity made him one of the most effective deputy marshals in the service. They shut down 17 operations in total, some as large as Quick's, others smaller, but no less cruel. They freed over 300 people from fraudulent contracts, saw 47 traffickers sent to federal prison. They made a difference, but the work took its toll. Long hours, constant travel, regular danger, and the emotional weight of witnessing suffering day after day wore on them both. By the time their 2-year commitment approached its end, Cole and Alara were exhausted in ways that went deeper than physical fatigue. I'm ready to go home, Alara said one night in a Denver hotel room, a year and 10 months into their service. I'm proud of what we've done, grateful for the chance to help others, but I'm ready for our life to be ours again. 2 months, Cole reminded her. We finish training our replacements, document our procedures, then we're done. Back to Dust Ridge, back to the cabin, back to boring domestic happiness. Promise? Promise. They kept that promise. On a cool autumn morning 2 months later, they shook hands with Garrett and their fellow marshals, accepted commendations for their service, and rode away from Denver without looking back. The journey back to Dust Ridge took 4 days, and with every mile, Cole felt weight lifting from his shoulders. They'd done good work, important work, but it had never been meant to be permanent. They'd given the world 2 years of their lives. Now the rest belonged to them. The cabin appeared over the ridge exactly as they'd left it, weathered but standing, waiting patiently for their return. The Henriks had maintained it during their absence, kept it from falling into disrepair, but it still felt abandoned in the way places do when the people who give them life are gone. We're home, Alara said, tears streaming down her face. We're actually home. They spent the next weeks reclaiming their space, cleaning and repairing, making it feel lived in again. Cole built additional rooms as promised,
expanding the cabin to accommodate the future they'd planned. Alara planted her garden, working the soil with practiced hands, planning seasons of growth. Morrison, the young sheriff who'd replaced Cole, visited one afternoon to report that crime in Dust Ridge had dropped significantly in the years since Quick's conviction. Other towns had followed suit, cracking down on labor trafficking, treating workers with more dignity. The change wasn't complete or perfect, but it was real. "You started something," Morrison said. "You and Mrs. Barrett. People saw that standing up to corruption was possible, that justice could actually work. It gave them courage to demand better." "That's good to hear," Cole said. "Now you keep that momentum going. Don't let them slide back into old patterns." "I won't, sir. I promise." After Morrison left, Cole found Alara in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, her hands working seedlings into carefully prepared rows. He sat beside her, not helping exactly, but present. "Morrison says we made a difference," he told her. "We did, but now it's someone else's turn to make differences." Well, she sat back on her heels, surveying her work. "Our turn to just live. Any regrets about leaving the task force, settling down?" "Not one," Alara said firmly. "I'm proud of what we accomplished. But this," she gestured at the garden, the cabin, the life they were building. "This is what I fought for. Not adventure or recognition or the satisfaction of punishing bad people. Just the simple right to build something of my own with someone I love." Cole pulled her close, kissed her temple. "Then let's build it. Everything we talked about and more." The seasons turned. Winter came and went, harsh but survivable. Spring returned, bringing new life to Alara's garden. Vegetables sprouting in neat rows, herbs thriving in the dedicated plot near the cabin. Cole built a chicken coop, and they acquired 6 hens who provided eggs and entertainment in equal measure. They fell into rhythms that felt both ancient and new, waking together, working together, eating meals they'd prepared from their own garden, falling into bed exhausted and satisfied in ways that had nothing to do with excitement or danger. One evening in late spring, a year after their return, Alara sat Cole down with unusual seriousness. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hands. Cole's heart jumped. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like bells ringing. Cole stared at her, processing, then broke into a smile so wide it hurt his face. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. About 3 months along. I wanted to wait until I was certain before saying anything." Cole laughed, pulled her into his arms, spun her around until she protested dizzily. "We're having a baby. We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Alara asked, searching his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Cole said. Terrified, elated, overwhelmed, but mostly just grateful. Grateful for you, for this life, for the chance to bring someone new into the world and show them what love and safety look like. Alara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared I won't know how to be a good mother after everything I've been through. Scared I'll break something precious because I'm still putting myself back together." "You'll be an amazing mother," Cole said with absolute certainty. "Because you know what it feels like to be broken. You'll teach our child compassion. Because you survived the worst and chose kindness anyway. You'll teach them strength. Because you refuse to let trauma define you, you'll teach them resilience." "You really believe that?" "I know it. The same way I knew buying your contract was the right choice. The same way I knew you were strong enough to testify. The same way I knew we'd make a life worth living. I know you, Alara Barrett, and I know our child will be lucky to have you as a mother." They prepared for the baby's arrival with the same determined focus they'd brought to everything else. Cole built a cradle from pine, sanded smooth and carved with simple patterns. Alara sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her careful stitches creating softness for someone they hadn't met yet, but already loved. The Henricks visited often, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby items from their own grown children. Other neighbors stopped by too, people from Dust Ridge who'd watched Cole and Alara's story unfold and felt invested in their happiness. The baby came in early winter, during a snowstorm that turned the world white and quiet. Sarah Henrick served as midwife, her experienced hands guiding Alara through labor that was long and difficult but ultimately successful. Cole held his daughter for the first time as dawn broke, washing the cabin in pale gold light. She was tiny and red-faced and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually settle to her mother's brown. "She's beautiful," he whispered, afraid to speak too loudly in case this miracle disappeared. "She is," Ilara agreed, exhausted but radiant. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months, debated and discarded dozens of options. But looking at his daughter now, Cole knew exactly what felt right. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope, because that's what she represents. The hope we almost lost and fought to reclaim. The hope that good things can grow from terrible circumstances. The hope that love and healing are possible even after horror." "Hope Barrett." Ilara tested the name, smiled. "I love it. It's perfect." Sarah Henrik left them alone finally, and Cole and Ilara sat together in the quiet cabin, their daughter sleeping between them, the future they'd fought for made manifest in 6 pounds of new life. "We did it," Ilara said softly. "We survived, we fought, we built something worth keeping, and now we're bringing her into a world where she'll be protected and loved and given every choice we were denied." "Yes, we did," Cole agreed. "And we'll keep doing it, every day, for as long as we're breathing. Because that's what parents do. They fight for their children's futures even harder than they fought for their own." The years that followed were filled with the beautiful mundane chaos of raising a child on the frontier. Hope grew strong and curious, learning to walk in the cabin Cole had built, learning to read from the books that had once belonged to his mother, learning about justice and compassion and strength from parents who embodied those qualities daily. Other children followed, a son they named Thomas after their neighbor, then another daughter they called Sarah in honor of the woman who'd helped birth them all. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, rooms added with each new arrival, until it was no longer a simple frontier dwelling, but a proper home, filled with life and laughter and love. Cole and Ilara grew older together, their faces weathering like the cabin's wood, bodies accumulating scars and aches from hard work and harder years. But they grew older together, which was the crucial part. Partners in every sense, building a life that honored everything they'd survived to reach. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep and the chores were done, they'd sit together on the porch and watch the sun set over the ridge, hands clasped, comfortable in the silence that came from two people who'd said everything that needed saying and knew each other's hearts without words. "Any regrets?" Cole asked one such evening, years after Hope's birth, their hair now streaked with gray and their hands marked with age. "Not one," Ilara said, the same answer she'd given years before. "You?" "Just that I didn't find you sooner. Think of all the time we wasted existing separately." "We found each other when we needed to," Ilara said wisely. "Any earlier, we might not have been ready, might not have recognized what we had." "True. Still would have liked more years with you." "We've got years yet," Ilara reminded him, "and every one of them is a gift I never expected to receive." Cole pulled her closer, kissed the top of her head where silver now threaded through the brown. "I love you, Ilara Barrett. Have since the moment you stood on that auction platform and refused to beg. Maybe even before in some theoretical way, waiting to meet the woman who'd teach me what real strength looked like." "I love you too," Ilara said. "You gave me back my life when I'd given up on living. Gave me choices when I thought I'd never choose anything again. Gave me a future worth fighting for." "We gave it to each other," Cole said, echoing words from years before. "That's how the best things work: mutual creation, shared growth, partnership." They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their struggles, their triumphs, and now their hard-won peace. Inside the cabin, their children slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams came to those who'd never known fear or exploitation or the desperate fight for survival. And on the porch, two survivors who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build toward light held hands and watched the night deepen, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The auction yard where they'd met was long gone, torn down and replaced with honest commerce. Sullivan Quick had died in federal prison, unmourned and unremembered except as a cautionary tale. The frontier was slowly civilizing, law and justice becoming more than just words. But here, in this cabin on this ridge, the real victory had always been personal and intimate. Two people who'd refused to let cruelty define them, who'd chosen healing over bitterness, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. They'd built something that lasted, something that mattered, something worth every moment of the fight it took to create. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night wind whispered through the valley, Cole and Ilara Barrett sat together in the home they'd made, surrounded by the family they'd created, living the future they'd fought for. Not perfect, not without scars, but theirs. And that was worth everything.